Good morning, everyone. Is my mic working, Erica? Good morning, everybody. Can everyone hear me? It might just because I'm loud. I've been told that I have a loud voice. Welcome to the Digital Innovation Summit, presented by Booz Allen Hamilton and produced by FedScoop. I'm Goldie Kamali, CEO of FedScoop, and I'm thrilled that you could join us today. We have some folks just arriving. I'm going to let you guys take your seats quickly so we can get started. We have an amazing day ahead of us. I'm really pumped and excited to have you. Let's let these folks get seated and let's get started. Okay, I'm going to keep going while these folks get seated. So, as many of you know, FedScoops works really closely with the White House on the tech priorities of the administration, and we bring the brightest people from government and the tech industry together to exchange best practices and identify ways to work together and collaborate. As we talk to all of the CIOs and CTOs and leaders in the agencies on a really regular basis, almost daily basis, more and more we talk about digital services. We hear about digital services. We hear about innovation. We hear about mixing things up. And there's an enormous amount of enthusiasm and energy right now in our community around these solutions and new people thinking outside the box and doing things, and people who've been here for a while and are really seasoned doing things that are a little bit different than the status quo. And so today we're going to highlight some of the best people who are doing some of the most exciting things in government and in the industry. And when we're talking about digital services and innovation, there's really no better partner to partner with than Booz Allen, who's really being the leader in this space and taking the lead on this issue and kind of putting a stake in the ground and wanting to partner with government and doing things differently. We have an amazing lineup. I don't know if in each of your little portfolios you've gotten the program. We have an extraordinary lineup of amazing folks today. And the first person to kick off is just one of my favorite people ever. I'm so pumped to have her. She always brings a lot to the table from a content side of things, but she just mixes things up and makes it fun, and I love her for it. She is the Director of Digital Government at OSIT at GSA, though she does so many other things, and she's doing more exciting things coming here soon, but she's going to be talking about digital strategy episode Hope Strikes Back and Returns. Please put your hands together for my BFF, my friend, the most awesome lady ever, Gwen Costin.
Love you. Thank you so much. Gosh, Goldie always embarrasses me. Pretend that I'm a rock star just for a minute here and work with you, talk to you. This is a great crowd today, and this is a really terrific venue. So thanks for having us all here today, and thanks for coming this morning. What I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the digital strategy, and I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing right and maybe a little bit about what we're doing wrong. So I want to start off, though, talking about the notes from the program that we had here. And so on the website for this program said, so digital has changed the way the world works. On the go, citizens and government employees alike demand modern, engaging, 24/7 access to the services and information that they want and that they need. Oops. Ruined my build on that too. So anyway, technical difficulties here. And so what I want to do is start a little bit with the digital strategy and a reminder of what's happening there. So about 4 years ago, scores of people from across government came together, taking a look at bringing together a government-wide effort to improve the digital footprint. There's been a lot of efforts going on. There's nothing new about that. There's a long history of using digital in government. And there's been also a long history of different work being done to bring it together and get us together on the same page and move forward. Now, the work that was done was really taking a look at the web policies and the web strategy and a mobile strategy and bringing those two together along with the real important part around infrastructure. And so the 21st century platform really is working on being information-centric, sharing services across agencies, being customer-centric or citizen-centric or public-centric, but all the while protecting the people and protecting the systems from bad things. And sometimes that seems like that happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And so when I'm thinking about when we're looking at this digital strategy and we're looking at what happened, really, I'm looking very much forward to this new Star Wars trilogy, and so we don't really know what happens in this next movie, so this is the only time I can give this presentation, because then the answers will be given. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the digital strategy and the digital strategy process vis-a-vis Star Wars. How many people here saw the movies Star Wars? I thought it was a pretty safe bet. Between the popularity of the films and the fact that this is a nerd crowd, I thought it was a pretty good one. So if you think about and I don't want to talk about the last three, also known as the first three films in the trilogy. I really want to talk about the ones that we started with, which were episodes 4, 5, and 6. And so if you take a look at those Star Wars, I'm going to give you kind of we're going to all get caught up so we're on the same page. So in the first movie, our heroes woke up from various stages and found out that there was this really, they realized that there was a problem, and then they got really involved in solving this problem, and then they blew up the Death Star. And it was awesome, except for that was only the first movie. So blowing up the Death Star actually wasn't the point. We had to go to episode 5, at which point all of the work that they had done was just the groundwork. But as we know, one of our heroes, Luke, had to really learn a lot about what his powers were and how to move forward on it. And they also had to learn who was on your side and who wasn't on your side. And then they also found out who's your daddy. The other thing that was important about that, though, is that it really was a transition. And so that there really was this end way to say, is this good, is this bad, and it is hard. So Han Solo is in Carbonite. He goes over, Boba Fett takes him over to see Jabba the Hutt. We find out that actually he knew that Leia loved him, but we all knew that anyway. So we go to the next movie. And the next movie is the movie in which everything comes together, and we blow up at the end, and then you have big animals dancing with small animals, and it's all cool. And so that's really kind of the trajectory of the Star Wars films that I just wanted to go through really quickly. And I want to talk a little bit about the Federal Digital Strategy Wars. Now, when we take a look at those three parts that we have in the Federal Digital Strategy Wars, we had the first step, which was really the building of the strategy, and it was the work that people came together in terms of waking up. We also know, though, that the introduction of the strategy and the culmination in the work that was done in terms of the many deliverables that agencies created was really just the blowing up of the Death Star. It was part 1. And after the digital strategy, I know there are many people in this room and there are many people in agencies who said, now what? What's next? Because we had this real big goal, which was this digital strategy and the completion of these deliverables, but then what do we do? And so there was time of just a little bit of confusion and organizing, though, because people actually, through this digital strategy, were able to organize themselves around the ideas of open, around the ideas of putting mobile first, around using a more data-driven model, using APIs to open up systems, really working on doing better purchases of security and of mobile devices, of taking a look at improving standards for security. And so there was a lot of work that was going on, and maybe there was some work in terms of identifying who were our friends and who were our enemies. But in this story, there's really not so much enemies. I don't see there's a Darth Vader as much as our enemy being the way that things always were. The enemy really being reactionary and going back to what we're comfortable with. And so in this model, in this movie, we actually got to the point where we're still doing this work. Now, in the third movie, the real thing is building together for that big goal. And so that big goal, though, and what we're looking for in that North Star is that it's really important to look at the strategy. So we have been in the weeds for the last couple of years, and weeds are good, but I want us to return back to the idea of the strategy and digital strategy, because that's going to be what's going to be moving us forward. So there was and I didn't realize that, so when we're looking at what I want to talk a little bit is about what you can get from a digital strategy. And there was a really good piece that was in Sloan School was talking about 4 aspects of digital strategy. One of the things that companies and governments can get from creation of digital strategy is process improvement and increasing efficiency. And that is a good thing, so that we can do things faster and we can do things cheaper, and that's really important. Another area is that it gives us opportunities using digital to create a better customer experience. And we know in government that's something that we're really working on, and that we really there's an increased commitment to doing that, and I'm really happy to see that. But these are operational goals, and they're not unimportant. I want to be really clear about that. It's not unimportant to be more efficient. It is not unimportant to have a better customer experience, but it's not transformative. Another thing you get from your digital strategy is that you can improve decision making. And we're seeing organizations that are using all digital channels to collect data so that they can make just-in-time decisions that are going to be more valuable for their organization as well as for their customers. And the other thing that a digital strategy can do is it can give you room to innovate. And this is where we're going to be transformational in terms of using digital to improve our decision making and using digital in order to drive innovation. And I want to be clear about the difference between process improvements and innovation. And as I said, I'm not saying that one is superior to the other. They are different. But if you have a process that you're making faster, but it's a bad process, it's still a bad process that's faster. And it's more efficient, and we're going to gain out of that. But what is it that really makes us think differently, that makes us jump ahead to doing new things? And that's really looking much further ahead than many of us have been, because we're really focused on improving our processes, being more efficient, and serving our customers. Again, not unimportant, but what it's doing is it's interrupting us from really doing a lot of innovation. So, as Yoda says, wrong doing it, you are. And so I want to spend the next few minutes talking about 4 areas that I want us to critically take a look at and hopefully put into our strategies so that we're thinking a little bit more forward-looking and so that we can do that innovation. And Master Yoda is always right. First of all, I want to be really clear. You get a car, you get a car, you get a trophy. The whole idea that we have is too often what we're seeing is we're praising ourselves for everything. And so we're not looking critically at what we're doing. I'm not saying we have to hate ourselves. I'm not saying we need sackcloth and ashes. What I'm saying is if we're so busy saying we're wonderful, we're losing the opportunity to critically look at what we are doing and make it better. And so every incremental change, every launch of every dumb website is like the second coming of Jesus or the third coming of Yoda. The idea is that we really need to get away from this you got a trophy thing. We need to celebrate what we do. We need to recognize the good things that are being done. We need to not step over the stage. But what we don't need to do is not put a critical eye on our activities. And so when we're looking at a strategy and we're looking at the implementation of the strategy and we're looking at what that next step is, we need to look behind us to see what worked and what didn't, and we need to be honest about it. My kids played pretty much every sport known to man. And we have a zillion trophies and medals all over the house. There's only one that my sons actually felt that they kept. And when my son played rugby in high school, he got the North-South Award, which meant that he was able to move the ball forward and backwards, and basically moving, because in rugby you move a lot side to side, so he was actually able to move the ball. He loved that trophy because it talked about what he actually accomplished and what made a difference. It wasn't that he showed up, it's that he performed. And so when we're looking at the work that we do, like I said, I don't want us to hate ourselves. I want us to love ourselves, but we are doing a good job on that. I want us to take a look critically and not be afraid to say, you know what, sorry, Maria, you don't deserve a trophy this time. But this next time, I can see that you're really working on it. Or, Susanna, we really didn't do as much as we thought we could do on that. How could we do better the next time? Because we're losing opportunities when everybody gets a trophy. And when we're looking at our strategies, let's take a look at what failed, and let's be honest about what failed so that we can build from there. What do these guys have in common? Pretty much everything. They're white, they're men, they have the same mustaches, the same outfits, same hairdos, same posture, same grumpy faces. So that's what they have in common. What do these guys have in common? Same facial hair, same t-shirts, same MacBooks. What do these girls have in common? They're young, they're the same age, they're all girls. That is not diversity. What we really need to do when we're taking a look at our programs and when we're looking at our strategy is really how do we really embrace true diversity. Now, we need to do a lot more on bringing people of color, LGBT folk, women, other minorities, and majorities welcomed into technology and into our space. But that said, and people with disabilities as well. That said, we also need to take a broad look at diversity to say who is at the table, so that if all the girls are sitting together, they're not really infecting the boys and there's no cooties being spread. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we have a diversity of ideas, where there's old people and young people, where there are people of different colors and races. We want to make sure that there are people from different agencies, so that we're also doing diversity across different agency lines, that we're looking at public-private partnerships, and that we're looking from state and local as well as federal government. And that we're also looking within our agencies for people who are different than us. So it's not the technology people talking to the technology people, and it's not the program people mad at the technology people because they're not talking to them. It's really looking at making decisions and building in processes that take it all together. This was taken from a work that we had done on the digital strategy, where we actually brought people together to work on experimenting on using agile processes for policy development. And so what we had in this room are people from 4 different agencies, from IT, from program staff, from some communications people. We had people from an agency, from different, USDA actually had 4 or 5 different sub-agencies that were represented in that. We had people that were old, people who were young, people who were new to government, people who were old to government. And by doing that, we were actually able to think in different ways, share information in different types of ways, and be truly diverse. And so when we're looking at diversity, it can't be us versus them, the new people versus the old people versus the young people, the tech people versus the program people. It really has to be a way, and you all know this, so I'm just telling you what you know, but we have to really work on getting those integrated project teams together. And we really need to be sharing across all the different disciplines and across the different agencies. And from a policy perspective, I really wish that we spent some more time working on incentives to do cross-agency work. And so that we could actually not create the one-stop shop that my agency has, but a one-stop shop that actually is more broad. And just for the record, that one-stop shop is called Google. The next thing I wanted to talk about is solving for X. The questions that we ask really defines the answers that we're going to have. And if we are not asking the right questions, we're going to find answers that meet those needs. And so what if if X is a better customer experience, I can redesign my website to make it better for my customers. If X is integrating the benefits that somebody and the services that somebody gets from my agency into somebody's life, that's a much broader piece. And maybe that updated website really doesn't make the difference. So maybe that is the piece where it really doesn't help as much as we would think. So if we're solving for X, but we should be solving for Mars, we're making an error there. And so part of it is thinking that out and thinking big and thinking beyond what we might see in front of us. And so it's not enough to say I'm mobile because I have a responsive website. Is anyone going there? I'll tell you, no. The piece of that is how do we actually use the open data to integrate that information in somebody's lives. So I want to make sure that I can integrate my information about Social Security into my mint.com. I'm not going to Social Security first. Social Security is a little part of my retirement. Not everyone's, but a little part. And so how do you actually look at it more broadly? I think that that's really critical. And so the problems that we set up, the questions that we ask, limit us or expand us. And so when we're looking at our strategy, let's look at those expansive questions, not the little ones. Also, the little ones are easier to succeed on. That goes back to you get a car. Ultimately, it's always about the people. Oh my gosh, you must be so bored. You knew I was going to say this. But it's true, and it really bears repeating. One of the challenges we had after the digital strategy is that people felt lost. They didn't know who it was that was going to lead them. But it is us. And so it is Han and Chewie. They were not interested in being heroes. They were interested in being smugglers and making bank. But what happened instead was they were drawn into something bigger. And many times they had to figure it out for themselves. They didn't have the Force. They didn't have lightsabers. They just had a bit of moxie. And when we look at heroes, the heroes are not just the big guys. The biggest bureaucrat in that whole series is C-3PO. What a bureaucrat. And when pressed, he ended up multiple times coming to the fore and solving the problem himself. Because when you look around, who's going to solve the problem? Is it going to be somebody writing a digital strategy out of the White House? Is it going to be an executive order? No, that has to be implemented. Everybody look to your right. Now look to your left. Now look in the mirror. Those are the people who are going to be solving these problems. Those are the people who are going to be improving these processes. Those are the people who are going to be taking this digital strategy and delivering on the promise that we have on it. You know, there's a lot of ways for us to go, and we need to continue doing the work on improving processes. We need to do the work to continue to improve customer service. But to get to that next step, to get to that the work that we need to be doing moving forward, to be delivering on the promise, and to be delivering on the expectations that everybody has, we need to move beyond looking at somebody else. And if C-3PO can do it, so can you. And ultimately, the story doesn't end. It comes back. And just as Harrison Ford is a little grayer, although he is still a badass. I mean, he ended up like breaking his arm or his leg. Yeah, he broke his leg because a garage fell on him, and then he drags himself out. And J.J. Abrams, he was on a talk show. He was talking about how he hurt his back. And he said, "Oh, my back hurts." And there comes Harrison Ford 2 days later on his broken leg. "All right, I'm ready to do it." We have to be like the person as much as we can ready to do it. And if our back hurts and that hurts us, we still have to figure out how to do it. And when we have broken legs and broken bones, we still need to figure out how to do it. But what I want to challenge you to do today and tomorrow, I want you to think about how you are going to be making an impact in this digital space, how you are going to be working with the people that you know, how you are going to be connecting diversely with people in this room, and how we're going to ask better questions so we can deliver the digital promise for people. Your only hope. Thank you.
Gwen, you give me hope. Thank you so much, Gwen Costin. Did I not set the stage right? Isn't she amazing? Let's give her another round of applause. Thank you. All right. Great way to kick off the day. You're our only hope, basically. No pressure. So our next speaker is going to be talking about open performance. She is Senior Vice President of the Strategic Innovation Group at Booz Allen. Please put your hands together for Julie McPherson.
Wow, what a great intro. That one's going to be hard to follow. I was sitting in my seat wondering, I wonder how I can make my favorite movie, The Sound of Music, in my speech today. But thankfully, for you guys, I won't do that. And instead, I have just a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you about digital and what digital means and how important it is. But first, let me thank Goldie and the entire FedScoop team. This is an amazing event that has been put together, and I think we're in for a really exciting day. As she mentioned, I'm Julie McPherson, Senior Vice President at Booz Allen Digital, and I lead a group of open technologists, enterprise integrators, cloud architects, and agile developers who are all helping our clients open their performance, really by solving their most difficult challenges. And I want to put maybe this day in context for us all. The proliferation of digital technologies is really opening up an awe-inspiring number of new connections, new products, new services, new insights, and new efficiencies that previous generations could only imagine. These connections have created opportunities that today's digital citizens and our next generations are going to reap for many years to come. In my mind, there's clearly never been a more exciting time to be digital, I think as evidenced by our standing room in the halls today. The challenge is, and I know each of you in this room know this well, right? The pace of technology change and the rapidness of it comes at a cost. And the cost is none of us alone, and it's hard to do together, can keep up with the rate of change of all this new technology. And it's even more challenging when you think about, hey, I have to still run and operate my mission efficiently and effectively today, and I have to do that at the same time I'm trying to keep pace with new technology. That's an almost unsolvable problem. But I believe there's a better way, and I think that many of you in the room do too, which is why you're here. And at last count, I will share with you, we had more than 306 people registered for the event today, representing 108 different organizations from government, from academia, from nonprofit, and from business. And I think we all hold the same belief that Gwen shared with us. We are the change, and we can make a difference. And so for the next 10 minutes, I just want to share with you maybe 3 ideas that can help shape the thinking of how we can harness all of these ideas inside our organizations to drive forward with the change we all know is possible. First, size doesn't have to be a vice, believe it or not. Many of us come from really large organizations with deeply experienced agencies. Some of you have missions the size of the moon. Some of you, your mission is to go back to the moon, right? What's more, though, the enterprise technology challenges around these missions and requiring to execute these missions continue to get more and more complex. We've talked about the rate of change of technology. We've talked about the fact that legacy infrastructure and operating your mission is challenging to balance. Many of you likely feel locked in through expensive proprietary vendor technologies. And ultimately, that means you're locked out of other options and solutions. And then, meanwhile, your mission's not standing still. New things are coming up all the time that we have to tackle and take on. But there are people pushing beyond that mindset, pushing beyond the next two upgrades, beyond what's current, where many people are frustrated by interoperability, cost constraints. There is an opportunity here, and we see the opportunity. How do you get your organization, though, to think this way, to think beyond what's next, and really connect what they're doing to what the business needs? And it reminds me of the story we've all heard, the NASA janitor story, when in 1962, then President JFK asked the janitor in NASA, "What are you doing?" And he plainly and simply replied, "I'm putting a man on the moon." And when you think about organizations of 20, 30, 60,000 people being able to push forward relentlessly with that one clear message and vision, that is a pretty incredible prospect. And in order to do that, I think we need to provide our teams three things. The first is a mission that they can believe in. Nothing's more important than that. People believe in the mission. A team of razor-sharp, collaborative, and open minds who can serve as the head of the spear. And finally, we need the right tools, the right infrastructure, so they can make stronger connections to their jobs, to their colleagues, and to their mission. There are companies and agencies here today who are doing that. Many of you in the room, likely. Greg Godbout, for instance, he's the CTO at EPA. Greg, are you out there? Yeah, he's hiding. He's only been there a few months, but he's already executing on his vision to recruit experienced, agile, and user-centered practitioners. Let me give you a brief example of how Booz Allen is doing similar work to Greg. We are a big company, and with even bigger ideas. But we've noticed that in order to tackle these digital problems, you need a vanguard, kind of Arhan and Chewy. These are the people who are resourced and chartered with being on the front line and operating at the forefront of digital. These people are licensed to open new perspectives and reuse each other's ideas. We treat them as our digital scouts. We encourage them to participate in open communities, to source and play with new technologies. And believe it or not, we don't stifle their creativity. Their charge is to raise the bar for our open solutions, standards, technologies, and attitudes. They're not just developers and technologists, though. They're data scientists. They're security engineers. They're digital and creative and open strategists. They're champions, evangelists, and ambassadors above all. But we do this because we know that great ideas come from any part of an organization. We're working to form tightly integrated and loosely coupled communities, both inside and outside the firm. And we know that communities are accelerating digital transformations faster than any company can on its own, and certainly even Booz Allen. Organizations must look to create teams that don't just value collaboration, but that truly inspire it. I admit this is a pretty daunting challenge to think about harnessing the power of an entire agency or even an entire department within an organization. But I believe we can create the tip of the spear that will really drive these transformations forward into the work that we do every day. My second point, as the pace of technology accelerates, we have to change the way we work to keep up. Just as Gwen said, you can't automate old processes and expect that those processes are going to transform what you're doing. You really have to take on and challenge new thinking in the way that you're getting your work done. And as each of us lead our respective organizations through enterprise transformations, from closed systems to open, agile enterprises, we have to reboot the software development practices that support it. Many of the problems we face today are more connected than they've ever been. And even though many of our systems have enormous overlaps, they're still often operating in very siloed ways. And the result is that we end up with giant monolithic systems that have to be built or rebuilt from scratch. But we don't believe this is the only way. And we believe that today, you have to think big, you have to think small. Servers have given way to VMs, which are given way to open APIs and microservices and containers. These new technologies promote savvy reuse. And when you can reuse more stuff, you become more agile, more flexible, and our enterprises become more open. This argument is easy to prove. James Graham, an enterprise content manager at the Department of Treasury. James, I know you're here. Where? No? I'm picking all the wrong. Oh, here you are in the back. I see you. I can barely see, but I can see you. He's one of the finalists for this year's FedScoop Digital Innovation Award, so good luck to you. I think they're going to be announced today at about 9:40. Through James's leadership, the Treasury is offering platform as a service and 18 software as a service solutions. He's serving over 200,000 customers across 6 federal agencies. He emphasizes code reuse to reduce cost, and reduce cost he has. It's working. His software solutions have achieved approximately $25 million in cost savings to date. James, along with many others of you here this morning, are proving that digital nirvana is not when you're building new things, it's when you're assembling new value. So keeping pace with technology comes from the savvy reuse of existing technology. Take Naveen Vembar, Director of IT at GSA's Integrated Award Environment, for example. He's leading one of the most exciting transformations and examples of reuse in the creation of an open enterprise in the federal government right now. For those of you that don't know, Naveen leads the modernization of the GSA IAE from 10 systems into one single common platform that is intended to improve efficiency, reduce overall cost, improve user experience, and increase transparency. I'm sure many of you will get a chance to chat with him today, and my colleague Manjeet Singh, who's wandering around here, there he is out there, during their fireside chat in an hour. But I think what's critical here is their modernization effort runs through open source technology. So I strongly encourage you to check out their OpenIAE GitHub when you get the chance. It's truly, truly brilliant and imaginary work. By opening up their approach, Naveen and his team are able to avoid vendor lock-in, connect to a community of open technologists who reuse open source code. My last point, and I know Naveen and his team will know this well, but open means so much more than open source. In my way of looking at it, there are at least 4 dimensions beyond open source to become a truly open enterprise. The first, open architectures. Open architectures vanquish inflexible enterprises and truly permit interoperability. They allow systems to transform, modernize, and easily connect devices, apps, and people. The DoD has been doing amazing work in this area for many years. Take DCIGS, the Defense Common Ground System, as an example. They wanted a way for intelligence gathering branches of the military to connect and share information. It's a powerful idea, and the concept means that analysts from the Army can reroute helicopters out of danger using intelligence that's gathered from the Air Force or the Special Operations community. The trouble is that these systems were highly functioning, but not operable, and so they weren't able to achieve that. However, the creation of open architectures and a common framework allowed these disparate family of systems to talk to each other and make that vision a reality. Open standards. Open standards are the building blocks that enable our communities to raise up great ideas together. Some of you may know, but our friends at 18F and the U.S. Digital Service released a set of open design standards for government websites. Designers and developers now have a set of tools to help craft user interfaces that are uniform when they're redesigning and creating new government websites. The standards are free for anyone to reuse. And if you haven't seen it, you must. And I will tell you, as they say, they're just getting started. They need the help of this community to make these standards the standard. Open communities. If you're a developer or a technologist, this is your license to play. Open participation in internal and external communities extend the freedom to explore, examine, and scout new ideas from the global ecosystem. My favorite idea, my favorite example of this open community is Netflix. They curate a community that serves their entire enterprise. They've opened up big data libraries, build and delivery tools, microservice repositories, data insights, security, and even UI libraries. They know fundamentally that communities can provision better software faster, and that to keep pace with their business, their enterprise, and their customers, they have to give away some ideas in order to derive value. Today, you have to keep an open mind. With open communities, the more you give away, the more you get back. It's why at Booz Allen, we made an investment to build and maintain physical and digital meeting points, intersections between communities, people, ideas, and technology. We host and participate in regular hackathons. We build an entire digital ecosystem where people can pose and answer questions and participate in meaningful discussions. And we encourage our digital vanguards to publish codes to our internal repositories, as well as build, participate in, and curate external forums. It's with this open attitude that we created Project Jellyfish, our open source cloud broker that allows enterprises to manage, automate, and control their complex cloud environments. In short, we invested in it, we developed it, and then we gave it away. And now we curate the community. The community provides this endless sea of possibilities because communities are accelerating digital transformations faster than any company can. Lastly, open data. For me, this is the future of insights. When organizations permit scientists and technologists to freely access, explore, and reconfigure their data sets, people have a richer understanding of the world around them. To stay on sort of a topical theme, 2 weeks ago, the Department of Labor released its Sweat and Toil app. Department of Labor, folks, shout out. You guys here? There you go. Nice, good work. If you're a data scientist or are interested in combating forced and child labor, download this app and find the API. The API taps into the Bureau's data library on child and forced labor, and it gives developers and data scientists the chance to integrate the data into their own research. And there's probably no better explanation for open data and the value of it than the one Carol Peer, Deputy Undersecretary for International Labor Affairs, recently gave. She said, "My hope is that the new Sweat and Toil app and the open data are used to promote social good, enabling more people to empower themselves with knowledge about these issues. We want more people asking questions, taking action, and demanding change." This is the way digital is going. This is the potential of open data, and we're a better world for it. I think there's a lot more that can be said here and likely will be said throughout the day, but my intent was really to just jumpstart and help us think about this conversation. Size does not have to be a vice if we inspire participation in our missions through a focused resource troop of digital vanguards operating at the very edge of open. We can lead a transition towards more open, agile enterprises together if we reboot the software development practices that support it. And to be truly open, we must think beyond just open source. So that's my challenge for you. Keep these ideas close, open ourselves up to learning from each other, and lastly, keeping an open mind opens performance. Thank you.
For your pen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Goldie.
Thank you so much, Julie. Those were some great recommendations for all of us. I'm excited to announce our next discussion. We're going to be talking about successes in digital. We have a really great lineup of some really smart people, and I'm excited to welcome them. Please join me in welcoming Susanna Fox, CTO of HHS, Maria Rote, CTO of DOT, and our moderator, Jan Mark Holzer from Red Hat. Thank you.
Oh, is this go down?
Oh, wow, we're down to 2.
I'm
I
Susanna.
have a weird effect on, I guess, my panel is everybody bails out, so I never met anyone, so.
We got it.
Well, thank you to everyone for inviting me to moderate the panel, and obviously going digital is a very exciting topic, and we see a lot of customers, being it private sector or public sector, really embracing it. But maybe to start out, we have maybe everybody introduce themselves on the panel, and then I introduce myself, and we get going.
Great. Susanna Fox, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at HHS, and I run the Idea Lab, which is an innovation lab cited within the agency as a resource. We bring in external talent to solve tough problems that the agency doesn't have the capacity to do on its own. I'd love to talk about some of the examples, but what we also do, which I think is just as important, is not just call in the superheroes from Silicon Valley, but to actually build up the entrepreneurial skills from within the agency. There are lots of people who have devoted their lives to public service who also have great ideas and great skills. And so we have programs to help them as well, including Ignite Accelerator and Venture Fund. And what we also do is create communities of practice, for example, around opening HHS's data to entrepreneurs and others, and also talking about government procurement, which from the private sector I never thought I'd become an expert in. But if you wake me up in the middle of the night, I can give a talk about our Buyers Club. Not that I want you to, but.
Hi, I'm Maria Rode. I'm the CTO at Department of Transportation. I've been there just a little bit over a year now. And a number of initiatives that I've been working on just across transportation is really taking that enterprise look across the department and what's been going on. You know, within transportation, you've got transit and railroads and all of the modes, different modes of transportation, and really digging into that on the data front to begin with. We're doing a lot of really cool things, building out a lot around visualization and analytics, and taking some of those stovepipes and really bringing that together. And how do you look at transportation as an entity across all the modes of transportation and using the data differently? And how do you do that? So we've really been digging in on that, as well as taking an enterprise approach to a lot of the other things that we're doing. And part of what I'm doing is really trying to look forward, not to tomorrow, but further on out, looking forward and saying, where does transportation need to be? We've got a lot of initiatives, and I'll talk about a couple of those during the Q&A, that are going on around the smart cities and connected vehicles and connected intersections and those kind of things. So just a lot of activity going on in transportation.
Thank you very much. I introduce myself too, Jan Holzer from Red Hat CTO office. You all have great interest to your job. If you ask anybody at Red Hat, what does Jan do? We don't know. So I've been with Red Hat for 11 years now. Started out, we were like 100 people. We're now like 8,000. We grow at a very rapid pace, which is a good problem to have. But I think I work a lot with Booz, Manjit, and others. And I always say my story is I breed pandas at Red Hat. And once they grow up and become products, we give them off to engineering and turn them into products, or we set them free into the open source community, and they just keep growing there. But I think, yeah, what we see as well is, I mean, going digital is everywhere. I think, as Julia said, open source has really driven commoditization from enterprise IT, but also really has accelerated digital innovation. If you look at every of the companies you know, being it Uber, being it Facebook, being it Airbnb, being it Alibaba, eBay, or whatever, they are all amazing companies. They're all based on digital, and they have a digital-first policy. And if you then look at all these companies, none of them actually have any physical estate, for example. Facebook doesn't create content. Everybody else does for them. Alibaba has no retail stock, for example. All these examples, Uber, who would have thought 2 years ago that somebody will put the taxi business out of their misery, and suddenly all you do is you press a button and you get an Uber, for example. And I'm at fault. I travel a lot international, and you get so used to these innovations where you also get very used on just quickly jumping other business, or you need to go digital, otherwise you just become marginalized, for example, and you really become extinct very quickly. But what we also see is 3 major areas, like mobile, of course, the end user experience, connecting the end user, and also the end user becomes much, much more demanding by getting the applications much, much faster. So as mentioned earlier from Julie and others, is development has become much, much more important. Everybody talks about DevOps. I personally have a very strong opinion that DevOps is not a product. It's really what we would call a lifestyle, and open source really has done this for many, many years. Cloud, where you run your digital business, and then IoT. I think Maria can talk a little bit about some of the stats around IoT, where you connect digital and analog, for example. So, but enough of this. We might just jump into some of the questions. And as I said, feel free from the audience, raise hands. We want to make this interactive, I think. But I think one really important part is, well, how do you actually promote and bring innovation, for example, internally and externally in your organization? What have been some of the challenges to embrace, for example, digital innovation?
Great question. You know, I was struck by, in listening into what you were saying and what the two opening speakers were saying, and I'm especially glad that transportation is up here on the stage with me. There's a lot to be done that's virtual and digital, but the work that we really do, that our agencies do, is really high touch. You know, when we're talking about healthcare delivery, there's a lot to be said for data, but then there's a lot to be said for, you know, the actual delivery of healthcare, which is the sort of end of everything that we do at HHS. So one of the things that we do to bring in outside innovation is to bring in someone who has the skills that the department doesn't have itself. And so, for example, HRSA came to us, one of our operating divisions, came to us 3 years ago and said, we know that we have a problem with the organ donation tracking system, and we think that we might need somebody to help us with logistics. It's been a process of handwritten labels. During an organ procurement, the doctors and nurses actually have to handwrite 50 to 80 labels. And then, you know, I heard stories of there being a cooler full of organs with a Post-it note on top. So there was no, right, it's frightening. And what's amazing is that there hasn't been more mistakes. And so what the Innovation Lab did was go out and find a 25-year veteran of UPS to come in and go out into the field, and within just 4 months, create a barcode scanner, a tablet, and a printer, so that we could automate this process and make it digital. But again, it's not virtual, this is real. And what we're able to do is track the organs as they go all across the country. And what's really neat is that it's an example of how in our programs, whether it's bringing in external talent as an entrepreneur in residence or innovator in residence, or also doing it in our Ignite Accelerator, we have a focus on the customer. We go out into the field and look at what they're doing so that we can improve that process. And we do small experiments. We in the case of the organ donation tracking system, David Cartier, the entrepreneur in residence, got this into the field very quickly to do 3 sites where he could see how it worked. And at the end of this experiment, at the end of this sort of minimum viable product experiment, he went back and tried to get the prototype back from the doctors and nurses, and they said, no, we're going to keep them. We can't go back. We can't get back in the box. And I think that's something that we really want to see in innovation, digital or otherwise, that people don't want to get back in the box.
Yeah. Maria?
On the so you know, bringing in innovation, I've learned in the last year that across transportation, in particular, the folks we have working a lot around data, they are really about really starting to get their arms around and wrap their heads around what's in the realm of possible with what we already have in the department, where things haven't been shared. You know, we've done a data inventory over the last year, bringing all that together, doing the, you know, putting things up on opendata.gov and doing all those kind of things. But really, the people that are there are really starting to think outside the box. What's in the realm of possible? Because with transportation, you know, you're looking at safety and those kind of things. But what else? What else is out there? And really starting to bring this together. And that innovation in some instances is not always coming from external. Well, we get more than enough ideas and plenty of people coming to the table saying, hey, cool, look at this. But a lot of that's coming internally. And whether you're taking that data whether you're using it in the geospatial arena, really trying to overlay some things, bringing in web feature services and that data and the visualization. A lot of that innovation is coming from internally, and people are really starting to think about what is in the realm of the possible, that it's not about, well, this is how we do it today. Well, what's possible? And learning that there's an entire group across the department that's like energized about this stuff. So we're really trying to tap into that and bring that in. I've been working with, much like you have the Idea Lab, where we have an idea hub within the Department of Transportation, and it's really been used for things like, we don't like the paper towels in the bathroom, let's do something else. Or let's change how we do something around hiring or something like that. And I've been meeting the last couple of months with those folks that run that, and I'm saying, you know what? So we've got these folks with really good ideas. How do I pull that out and how do I get it? And I'm really looking at using that idea, that whole idea lab, to bring some of that in and take that whole idea lab to the next stage, that whole idea hub, that idea lab. What's the next stage of that? And really start bringing in more of those ideas and tie that into, how about a sandbox capability, so that somebody who may be in accounting or in a budget person or doing HR work, they go home and they do work at night and they've got their whole house networked. And they've got, like Wolf over there in the audience, everything connected, and they like to do stuff. Well, great. How do I tap into that capability that people really want to contribute, but their primary job functions in HR? How about building out that sandbox? How about bringing in those ideas and allowing people time during their day, maybe 4 hours, a couple of weeks or a month, and being able to do that? So I'm finding that there's a lot of innovation, a lot of really good ideas going on, even within the department.
Yeah.
Can I pick up on something Maria said? So I love your point about the uploading the data has had some unforeseen consequences of people within transportation looking at it, because that's something that we found at HHS, that in starting to put up the data sets, what we find is that one of our biggest customers for healthdata.gov is within HHS.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Yeah,
the secretary wants to know what's going on because he can't see across the board. We're helping.
And it's really cool. We think of it as it's a way to take the temperature of the patient, and we see it that people within the department are using it. And because it really started, healthdata.gov, the initiative started because Todd Park, the first HHS CTO, knew that this data is the new oil, right? We've all heard that data is going to fuel the future. And it's certainly fueling the future for government, and what we've seen is that it's created this ecosystem of entrepreneurs who are then able to serve the healthcare system by looking at the county level, state level, and being able to sort of move resources around and provide recommendations to hospitals, health insurers, and others so that we can serve our citizens better, because that's what this is all about. It's not just government and CMS and Indian Health Service serving our citizens, but it's across the whole spectrum. And so freeing the data allows that to grow up, and that's really what we want to see, this public-private ecosystem.
Oh, that's great. And I could only imagine, like, all this digital innovation and acceleration and delivery of services has probably a huge impact on the infrastructure side, also just how you consume resources, how you deploy resources, for example. And clearly everybody talks about mode 1, mode 2 IT today. At least we got away from the dreaded pet and cattle comparison. But I could only imagine that it's still a hugely complex issue, and as much as we all want to move towards mode 2, clearly, there is reality, and there will be like mode 1 stateful scale-up type applications for a long, long time. So I just wonder what has been like the impact in terms of infrastructure, developers wanting like services really quickly, but it probably meant a lot of like changes in processes and how you deploy infrastructure and deliver infrastructure services.
Yes.
All of the above, yeah.
I'm going to go two ways with this. One of it could be just internally innovation and development, and we don't have I would say, this big development group or team. But when you think about tapping in developers in the development community, I want to give you an example around transportation, just around the smart cities, some things we talked about previously. There's opportunities across in transportation. When you think about it, there was like 4.8 billion hours wasted in traffic and congestion, another 3.9 billion in 2009 in just fuel waste. And that's like 33 billion dollars in productivity around truck operational delays. And when you start looking at those opportunities, and I'm going to get to your API question here in a second, you start bringing in those opportunities, and what that comes to is to say, okay, what can we do to address those? In Southeast Michigan, there's a test bed that's going on right now, and there's almost 30 intersections that are sending out data. And there's also about 2,500 cars involved in this smart cities testbed in Southeast Michigan. So you've got all this data and all these things going on. In a 6-month period, there are 88.5 million, I'm trying to get my numbers right, 88.5 million messages coming out of those intersections. So there's things going on, a light, a bridge out, stuff going on with those intersections. Couple that with another 12.5 million messages coming from the cars. And what that translated to over a 6-month period is about 19 advisory messages every 5 minutes for the driver. So about every 15 seconds, a driver was getting a message about something happening, whether it's in an intersection, in the road, the car next to him, in front of him, something like that. But what's really happening is this test bed and some of the other activities going on across the country is really laying out what that architecture is. We've built out an architecture for that communications across the board. We've also built out the APIs that says, here's the APIs that are available. So now we have data, we have an architecture, and we have APIs. One of the things we're doing is reaching out to the developer community to say, we've got this stuff, what's in the realm of the possible? When you think about transportation, you think about the roads and you think about, your stop sign and your octagon. How did all of that evolve? Many, many decades ago, over time, we're now driving on the right side of the road. Every stop sign's a red octagon, all the lights are yellow, you got red, yellow, green, everything's the same. How did it get there? And it wasn't laws that were put in place, that evolved over time. And think about that model of that architecture for the roads and the framework, and think about that in a digital perspective. So you start laying out the architecture, you lay out the APIs, and you make that data available to the developer community. All of a sudden, hey, cool, look what we can do. They talk about connected cars, that's great, but what about the rest of the intersection, and what about the rest of it, and all of those messages, and what's in the realm of possible with all of this, given the data, the APIs, and at least the core architecture for that, so.
I love this question because you can go so many different directions.
I have about
you know,
6
in terms of-
examples. That was
right,
one.
right. In terms of infrastructure, because and again, it's neat to think about the parallels between transportation and health and human services. And I'll just touch on data. So in terms of health data, we're looking at it at 3 levels. There's the population level, and that's healthdata.gov, where we're opening the spigots so that people can get the full flow, the sort of fire hose of data, where, as I said, people can make decisions based on sort of national trends, state trends, county trends in terms of how we're doing in terms of healthcare delivery. And that's really important for healthcare delivery reform, to understand where the interventions are and what's happening. At another level, colleagues of mine are working, of course, on the interoperability roadmap. And that's where this is going to empower, hopefully, more discovery at the practice level. We want to be able to help clinicians and researchers to see patterns within a hospital, patterns within a certain practice. And then this is also happening at the individual level. We have an entrepreneur in residence who's working at CMS right now in creating an API for Blue Button. And if you're not familiar with Blue Button, it started at the VA and then is now available at CMS. And it's really simple. It's just you can go to the site, and if you are a Medicare beneficiary, you can click a blue button and have a very simple text file of, let's say, all your medications list. You can download your data. And it's been pretty simple, but it's been transformative. I heard one story of a veteran who, when he traveled, would have to check an extra suitcase for his medical record. He doesn't have to do that anymore because he's got it electronically. And what we now want to do is create an API, and really it's creating an infrastructure and creating a new, hopefully, ecosystem of entrepreneurs who will serve veterans, who will serve Medicare beneficiaries, and hopefully lead a market where people can direct their data to an app. so that they can then get, whatever it is that would serve that population, such as medication reminders.
No, that's great. And I mean, as we talked about a number of examples, I figure you probably have plenty of other examples to talk about how, for example, mobile, IoT, smart cities, cloud all come together. So probably might be interesting to the audience, maybe talk about a couple of realistic examples on how you actually have transformed, for example, services and build new services as well. So.
A couple of things. So one of them is think about the inspections. You see going down the highway where the trucks get inspected all the time, right? Truck drivers go, they pull in, they get the records checked, and off they go. Well, how about some work around that's going on? Trying to integrate some wireless technologies in with the drivers of those big trucks that are going down the road. So there's a lot of work going on in that space right now, because when you look at the drivers and the records, there's an entire list of things that drivers are looked at as they're driving and as they pull into those inspection stations. Well, how about if sometimes they didn't have to pull into that inspection station because all of these blocks are checked, they've met all the criteria, they've slept their number of hours, they've met X, Y, and Z, and how about integrating some wireless technology so as the truck driver's coming up on an inspection station, they don't have to stop. So when I talked about the $33 billion in dollars in wasted productivity in trucking operations, this is just one little piece of that, where you can start integrating and where there's testing going on and wireless capabilities for just trucking operations. And that's really just one example of where technology is really benefiting. And it comes to, while there's operational efficiencies, to Gwen's point, there's also bigger, longer term and bigger picture efficiencies across the board as you start tying all these things together. But just doing something like that and integrating that wireless capability in with the truck driver so he doesn't have to stop, or she doesn't have to stop. How about that? Something simple will get you a long way.
My favorite example right now is actually in emergency response. During Hurricane Sandy, we weren't sure where people had evacuated, and whether people up, in the Rockaways in these high rises who rely on a ventilator, we weren't sure whether they had actually evacuated or not. And so we sent a lot of first responders, up these 40 flights of stairs, and found that the person had evacuated. And so what my colleagues at HHS did was create a map using CMS data, because anybody who's on electronic dependent medical equipment, durable medical equipment, they are very often, it's billed to Medicare, Medicaid, and so we have a monthly update, a very accurate update that's mapped to the address and the apartment number, and so therefore we are able to. There's a map that you can go to now. So if you're interested in just out of curiosity, how many people in my neighborhood use durable medical equipment, so that if there is a disaster, how would I know? How might I help? Because first responders are often citizens within the neighborhood. But then we can flip a switch and give first responders access to the actual apartment numbers and where people are, so that we know where people are with DMEs, durable medical equipment. But we realize that we still have this issue where we don't know whether they've evacuated or not. And so we held a challenge. And that's one of the things that's been really wonderful, to see the challenges that we've been able to bring in and crowdsource. Because what we understand in government is that we don't have all the answers. We have a lot of great questions, but we don't have all the answers. So sometimes we're going to bring in a targeted entrepreneur in residence, and sometimes we're going to hold a challenge. My favorite outcome of this challenge is the person who came in third was a 16-year-old high school student who entered the challenge under his father's name, because you're not allowed to enter until you're 18. And his idea was essentially to create an Internet of Things, so that each DME would have a little RFID that would send a ping. And it's a little complicated, but essentially the ping would go out from a DME to another one until it found, and it's just a very lightweight, it doesn't rely on the internet. It's just it's an Internet of Things that goes ping, 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 until it gets to a hospital and says, essentially, I'm still here. And then ping, 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 the hospital says, I know you're still there, I'm sending someone out. And in that way, it can be so much more targeted. So the kid took the $5,000 that he got coming in third, and developed his idea further. He's published it. He presented it this summer to us, and this might actually be the solution that we use. And it's because he was volunteering in a nursing home during Hurricane Sandy that he was inspired. And that's really what we want to see. We want to see the inspiration coming from all of us, all of our citizens, inside and outside government.
So how about if we take a national address database and integrate it with the work that you guys are doing, and that way we have a national address database that's X, Y, and Z coded, lat long and elevation, so that as something's going ping, 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 and it stops, and oh, by the way, it's not a building with an address, that it's geocoded, and oh, by the way, it happens to be Lake Smith. How about if we tie that into it? That's something we're working on.
No, that's great. I think we are almost out of time. We have like 40 seconds left. I'm not even going to ask for questions, but I might just ask maybe those of you want to look in your digital crystal ball and how you see sort of digital innovation evolve over the next in our industry, 5 years, like light years away, just to reference back to Star Wars, I guess. But maybe just quickly what you might see, where you see yourself in 3 or 5 years around digital innovation. What are going to be some major things you feel might be on the horizon? But we really probably have only a minute.
I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah,
My crystal ball's not very good. No, actually, part of what I'm doing is really trying to at least look forward, not to be on the bleeding edge, but looking at what are those ideas and bringing in those ideas into the department and say, what could we do? And also, because we've got so many state and local partners, in transportation, working with all the states, other agencies, with our geospatial, what's in the realm of possible? I mean, that's kind of how I look at it and say, why, probably, what's the so what, and what's in the realm of possible, and why not, are probably 3 of my favorite questions to say, okay, let's check it out.
I don't have a crystal ball, but what I would hope to see is that right now there's a lot of excitement about, as I said at the beginning, superheroes coming in from Silicon Valley to save us all. And yes, that's awesome. I love that, and I love bringing in entrepreneurs and residents. I really believe that no one's resume should be complete without a tour of duty in the government. And that you, especially in healthcare, you can't understand the U.S. healthcare system unless you spend some time serving. And so that's what I want to see. I want to see it absolutely de rigueur in Silicon Valley, that everyone should have a tour of duty. And in 5 years, what I would love is that Silicon Valley comes to us and says, what can we learn from the amazing innovation that the government has been able to create?
And I would encourage the reverse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much to the panelists. It was fantastic, and we're back.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan, Maria, and Susanna. That was awesome. If this is a different event than the typical event you've been to, let's hear some noise. We're mixing it up. All right, you guys, sit still because, if you lose your seat, then don't tell me about it because there's a lot of people waiting in the wings. Actually, let's take a moment, and if anyone needs a seat, there's some free seats. Please come grab them. Let's do that real quick. FedScoop team, please direct everyone who's in the hallway and make sure they get a seat. Michael Palmer's been sitting on a step. Let's hook him up with a seat. All right. Okay. I'm going to keep going. This segment of our agenda. Oh, it's loud, guys. May I have your attention? All right. So this section of the agenda is an exciting one. I'd actually like to ask Greg Wenzel, Executive Vice President of the Strategic Innovation Group at Booz Allen, to join me. We are going to be giving out, thank you, Greg. We're going to be giving out the Digital Innovation Awards now. We wanted to recognize a digital innovation disruptor in our community, and we received hundreds of nominations. We narrowed it down to 22 finalists who received the most nominations. We put it up for vote on FedScoop. We received thousands and thousands of votes, and I am thrilled and excited to share with you our winner, who is an awesome contributor in our community, doing big things, doing things differently. And please put your hands together to congratulate and join me in congratulating Deb Diaz, CTO of NASA. Congratulations. Awesome. Let's see. Actually, if you guys can stand here and take a photo together, that would be awesome. Please.
Come on.
Okay, all right.
Everybody. Who else wants it? Come on in.
And then wait, Christina, one with just these two.
Come on.
Let's give her a round of applause. Congratulations. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. All right. Okay, so I did notice something, that the first half of our agenda was all women, and awesome women. That doesn't happen too often at a tech event. Not often enough, as far as I'm concerned, but amazing women. It just so happens that the next half of our agenda is all amazing men. Let's give them a round of applause. All right. So our next session is going to be a fireside chat with Naveen Vembar, IT Director at GSA, and Moonjeet Singh, VP of the Strategic Innovation Group at Booz Allen. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Just checking this works.
You on?
Good. All right. My name is Moonjeet Singh. I'm a vice president in our digital practice. I lead up our enterprise cloud services practice at Booz Allen. What that means is I get the opportunity to interact with some amazing clients, such as the one here to my right. My enterprise cloud services team and our whole practice really focuses on clients that are implementing kind of end-to-end digital solutions. So they're creating really interesting user interfaces and user experiences on mobile phones and wearables and all the different methods that we have to consume services. But then they're also thinking about the back-end services and how do those services scale and handle the demand of a digital enterprise. Julie hit on a lot of the tenets that we talk about, and what's funny is that before we even had met Naveen, he was talking about some of the exact same tenets around open source and modularity. On the GSA IAE program, we have a pretty solid configuration and design in terms of aligning to those tenets, and that's really thanks to Naveen's vision. Around the open source component, pretty much every component that we're deploying inside this architecture is open source, with the exception of our Atlassian suite, which is our collaboration suite for developers. But all the major components inside the architecture is open source. Like Julie mentioned, open source, open does not just mean open source, and so from an architecture perspective, we are adopting an open architecture approach with open standards. Really what that means is we can do things like a marketplace that we're creating that enables our consumers of the services to stand up these incredibly complex environments in a very simplified way. So they can stand up a service, it automatically creates a GitHub repo for them, it automatically creates Jenkins job to do that whole DevOps thing that we talk about all the time. It creates swarms of Docker containers. A little geeky, I know, but the point is that it abstracts all that complexity, and we can do that because we have that open architecture concept enabled. From a modularity perspective, we talk about how important microservices are. That was one of the things that Naveen and his team set out from the very beginning. And so we're looking at different solutions to help enable that. It's a very exciting time right now, I think, to be involved in this space. We have, it's almost dizzying. We have, Jan Mark was here just a moment ago. We have Red Hat OpenShift as part of that, main solution offering there. There's also Kubernetes from Google that's been open source recently, so you can take these really powerful systems that these companies have been using at scale and start to deploy it inside your own enterprise. I actually have deployed a couple of these at home on Raspberry Pis, which is just incredible, on $40 computers. It's amazing. And then the last piece is around the loosely coupled, but tightly integrated. And I think that's really important. And Naveen will talk about how we're starting to implement some of those concepts as well. So before we jump into it, Naveen, just a quick intro, your organization and yourself.
Sure. My name is Naveen Vembar. I'm the IT director for the integrated reward environment at the GSA. I'm also actually the cloud engineer at the GSA, which is something relatively new for me. And running around basically, pointing out all our cloud efforts across the GSA and figuring out how they all work together. In the IAE hat, which I've been in for a bit longer, that's actually something where we're bringing together 10 major systems, around award and acquisition, and pushing them, making them actually interoperate at a data level, but also execute well on our technology so that is all easier to do, right? I mean, fundamentally, our cloud platform here is all about getting to service faster, right, for our users, which are, a pretty broad base of users. So, my role is actually sort of, pointing at things and saying, well, I want to do it open, so why don't we do that? That's that, I like the idea of containers. How do you make that work? That's kind of my role. But all of it is designed to actually get us to the point where what we can do is have what are essentially large capabilities built out of small parts that are actually, achieving this goal that I think we've had in computers for years upon years upon years, right? Everything from SOA and object-oriented programming, all of that was, break things down, decompose things, and this is, maybe another iteration of that. But the reality of working capability from that is code from the infrastructure level up that is small but integrated, as you said, loosely coupled and tightly integrated is something that's really powerful and something that I want to see happen, throughout the GSA, throughout the government, right? Because at the end, a microservice is a service, right? And if we think about a microservice from the perspective of who it's serving, that's something that can become a very powerful thing.
So we, typical geeks, we jumped right into the back-end architecture.
It's a real problem.
Talk about, it is a problem. Talk about kind of what you think some of the core tenets or characteristics are of digital government, like from a user experience or the consumption side of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think fundamentally, part of the reason why I end up talking sometimes about the back end, right, is because what I want to do is make that as simple as possible to reach to reach the user, right? Get the technology out of the way, because the most important thing that we can do, especially as people in government, right, is provide a service to the community, to the citizen, to the end user, to the vendor that's seeking to do business, to the person who has the durable medical equipment that we were hearing about earlier, right? So from that perspective, the idea of digital goes significantly to user experience, and it goes beyond, I've taken my form and I've put it on the web, right? That isn't digital. I think there's been a video that I've seen in a couple places lately, which is the video that you have to fill out if you want to get financial services from the state of California, and it basically prevents you, if you're a homeless person, from actually getting through it because you can't actually put in your home address, right? The web format prevents you from doing that. That is, okay, it's on the web, but that doesn't make you digital, right? That's not thoughtful, it's not user-oriented, and it's not really getting you to the point where you're actually succeeding in leveraging the technology, which is, for, like I said, like you and I said, right, geeks like me, it's pretty cool to actually provide the real service in the end. So that element of thinking through user experience and actually, for folks like us who are the geeks, right, building that capability, building the platform, so getting to service delivery and putting it in front of users rapidly, I mean, like in days and weeks as opposed to months and years, is really key.
Let's expand upon that a little bit. So on the platform side, I mean, there's we talked about some of the certain tenets, the characteristics. Your team has moved very aggressively in terms of deploying some of the technologies. First organization to deploy Docker Trusted Registry. Again, getting a little bit geeky, but basically that container mechanisms that Julie talked about before, that's one of the core tools to ensure that you're using a secure version of these containers, and something that from a provenance perspective is something that can be trusted by the organization. We're looking at some of the first tools that Chef has delivered as part of their DevOps suite. What other kind of characteristics or what major tenets do you think are important in these backends to ensure that they can keep up and scale with that user experience, user demand?
I think at a core, right, this idea that infrastructure is code becomes a very, very important part of execution at the platform level, right? The idea that you can you can actually sort of encode what is the real thing that this piece of software needs to go run on. With that software becomes key, because at that point you can start getting to that DevOps idea, right? Every step of the way is now an element of automation, which really means that that allows a developer who's focused on the business side application to write a minimum amount of code, and everything else is on rails for them. Everything else kind of moves them through that process. You know, they know they have to write that code. They know they have to write those tests. But after that, just, you know, hit the red button and it goes, right? And in a lot of ways, it divorces the person who's building your capability that's business facing from the infrastructure, which is cool too, because then, you know, for we in government who are trying to buy things, you can buy those things in smaller increments, right? You can go out there and really say, hey, look, I'm really only looking for a module that implements this part of the FAR, right? And that's all I want. Right? And just give me that microservice and make sure that it can actually work within this container. You're done, right? Those are the requirements, and we'll move them around to whatever infrastructure we think works best for us. We'll make sure that that we'll scale up and scale vertically, scale horizontally where we need to. That doesn't become then the responsibility of the builder of that capability, right? That's actually something that I think is very cool. And you know, some of the aggressive nature of what we're doing is actually. You know, I get impatient, right? Because I feel like we end up getting in our own way as a government when we talk about new technologies. And some of that is, you know, small c conservatism about, well, we've done it this way, so we're going to keep doing it that way because that has gotten us through our ATO, which, by the way, we got our ATO today. So I'm like, oh my gosh, can't wait, you know, so happy. But that ATO, right, that ATO process, I want to sit down and have this conversation with our CISO and say, hey, look, if I want to deliver twice a day going forward, how does that work, right? How does that work? Well, you have to at some point trust the fact that, okay, I've got a container in the trusted registry. I've got my images that you've secured. And, you know, unless something pops through the automation, there's not going to be an active need for you to put your hands on that and say, oh, wait, let me go and do a manual scan. Let me spend 4 weeks engaging an IV&V team, which are all good things if you don't have those capabilities in place.
So there's a couple points you made there. I want to make sure they're not lost. So one is the ability to procure services smaller. So, you know, I think one of your visions that you have is that if we're able to take something like IAE and open source it, which we are planning to do next year sometime, right around the release 4 timeframe, and we make that available for reuse for government, and people start to deploy that and they start to reuse those services, that government agencies can actually acquire technical services and I think by extension professional services on a smaller scale. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about, like, with our open sourcing plans, you know, how do you hope that this is kind of proliferated throughout government? You know, what your hopes are in terms of how that will be adopted larger than the GSA?
Sure. So, you know, we have this idea of open source from the ground up, right? So the platform itself will be open source. The code that we're producing that lies on that platform will be open source. So, you know, what does that really give you, right? You know, not every solution, not every platform, not every, you know, piece of code is actually something that every agency needs, right? But if we have, let's go with our Docker registry again, right? If we have a container that actually meets, that has a piece of software in it that you need, and we've gone through the process of saying this is a useful piece of capability, we've secured it, we've proven these controls out, you should just be able to go and pick that up from your agency and use it, and actually you know, leverage those capabilities without actually having to you know, put in your own time and effort to make that happen. On top of that, right, you know, what makes the platform work, right, that we're building, you know, we've made choices that are specific to our program, but I guarantee you, because I'm seeing it at other places in the GSA itself, I guarantee you that platform provides a basis that is massively valuable, and it creates massive you know, shortcuts of time and effort on the part of your organization to get you to an end result of, oh, okay, now I can go and deploy DevOps capabilities, right? And you know, those are things that become very very cool. But beyond that, you know, this is where, you know, at a philosophical level, you know, we are serving the U.S. you know, taxpayer. We are serving the U.S. citizen, and to my view, like, we have to find a way to open up what we do, because it is actually owned by that taxpayer, right? And so that beyond a technical and beyond a cost saving, beyond gaining collaboration from excited and interesting people out in the world, you know, I think that there's a philosophy behind that is, you know, why we're here.
Yeah, I mean, I think That's a point that is really worth emphasizing. So watch that space. It's called OpenIE. It's available on GitHub. Once we open source this, we're open sourcing everything, every piece of code, every chef, cookbook, well, everything that's not going to violate our ATO or, provide any sort of risk or threat there. But the majority of the data we're going to be open sourcing along with the code. And so you can take this in your agency and stand up the same microservices architecture the GSA has spent about a year building, which I think is awesome. That's when we talk about reuse in government, that's incredible. One thing you talked about, the second point I wanted to make was around, kind of the challenge with DevOps, right? And so you're talking about being able to deploy multiple times a day, doing the whole continuous integration, continuous delivery. There's like the ATO impacts to that and making sure the IA teams know that they don't need to go through a full audit every time we do that. What other challenges have you seen, and maybe talk at a high level about how you're kind of approaching those?
So, DevOps is culture. I think that somebody else said that earlier up on the stage. And that is something that's actually where our struggle is throughout, right? Whether it's open source, whether it's using Agile, whether it's using DevOps, the biggest problem that we've always run into has never been the technology, right? The technology is a solvable problem. It's the culture. And that also is a solvable problem, but it takes time and effort, right? We have to, putting people together who haven't been together before, right? The ops side and the dev side and the business team and the security team all into a room and say, hey, you're all owners in this process, right? Where in the past, what they're used to seeing is, that slot in the wall, which papers fall through, and they pick it up and say, oh, I gotta go ATO system now, or oh, this is the architecture for the thing I gotta maintain for the rest of, the next 5 years. Okay, that's interesting. That is all something that is totally new, and we've gone through our growing pains in our program for it, and I think every program that actually goes down this path, and every agency that goes down this path is going to see that happen to them as well. They're gonna see those struggles as well, and I think it is something where you have to find our way to actually find those small successes, find those grow those pockets of cultural success that then can expand outward to the other, to either your skeptics or, just the larger group as a whole. I think that's been one of the biggest ways that we've succeeded. We started with some of this stuff, around Agile, for example, with a very small program, with a very small, component of work. And we got success, and the people who are involved in that now are the biggest evangelists for Agile within the whole program, right? Within the whole effort. And I think that's something that becomes very key.
So I think, last question, we're getting to the top of our slot here, but we're constantly dealing with this almost dizzying landscape right now of new technology solutions, products that are coming out. The pace, as Julie talked about earlier, it's insane. It's the fastest I've ever seen. Just on like the way that we schedule our containers, I mentioned some of the products earlier. We're doing an AOA next year to try and figure out which is the best container scheduling system. I suspect that we're going to have multiple AOAs coming up along those lines as the technology trends continue to evolve. Which technology trends do you have your eye on in the next year or two that you think are gonna play a significant role for us?
I think DevOps Sec, right? If you add the security into the DevOps world, that becomes something that becomes very, we're touching that right now, right? And I think in the next year, if we're not there, right? If we don't come out the end of, this fiscal year and really say this is how we're going to address that. If not, this is what we've already built to address that. We're going to start falling behind, right? The ability to push capability, service out to the world on a regular, rapid basis is something that is so expected now of everybody but the federal government, right? Like if you aren't seeing new product coming out of the companies that you're using on a regular basis or significant updates, you're aware of that, right? So that becomes something where really bringing in that security thing and not ignoring it. Not just fighting it because you want to, you see it as an obstacle, but making that part of the team is very tough. And that's cultural change on a lot of fronts, right? As well as a technological change, right? Finding our way to, scanning into Docker containers. We were just having a discussion about that. Finding a way to, to really sign those containers and those images in such a way that you can automate the creation of a security plan and of security architecture documents, right? That's something that's kind of interesting. How do we do that, right? If you're using these containers in this way, isn't that a bulk of your security document already written? Because you've signed those things and you've already inherited those controls. So why are we spending our time doing that, right? And how do we make that a regular part of our work?
So you guys can see why I love working with this guy. You know, at Booz Allen, this is the type of projects that a lot of us hope to work on, clients that are really pushing the edge like this, and there's so many of you that are doing that now. I think the rise of FedRAMP has helped out with that. A few pioneers like Naveen and his team, and a lot of you that are in the room are really paving the way forward for, you know, numerous agencies to kind of follow in your footsteps. So just want to thank you for your time today, for coming here, and Naveen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen and Munjit. That was awesome. I just saw Naveen jump on stage, so I wanted to shake his hand before he jumped off stage, and it reminds me of Todd Park, who's a huge digital innovation champion, and he used to jump on and off stage, and he'd give me a heart attack because he'd be jumping on the edge of the stage for like 20 minutes. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to fly off stage, you know? So anyhow, all right, we are going to start our next session, our next panel, and we have quite the lineup for you. We're going to talk about what's next on my digital agenda. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Dave Bennett, CIO of DISA, Dr. Marvin Carr, Policy Advisor of the Office of the CTO and the Executive Office of the President, Todd Calhoun, Director of Program Assessment and Evaluation at the U.S. Marine Corps, Ashwin Vasan, CIO of CFPB, and our moderator, Russ Holmes, Director of Public Sector at Hortonworks, our sponsor today. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause.
Good morning. So recently in Forbes, Edward Hess of the Darden School of Business wrote on the subject of innovation, when we are on autopilot, we are not critical or innovative thinkers. He went on to say that our environments have taught us that good performance means avoiding failure. This is a big problem when it comes to innovation. So I think it's significant that the folks up here today are known as innovators, and you can be very, very proud of that because it's very difficult to do in this environment. So first of all, a big round of applause for those who are innovative among us. And with that, can you introduce yourselves briefly?
Dr. Randall Cole, actually sitting in for Dr. Todd Calhoun, unable to be here today. I am Data Readiness Branch Head within Headquarters Marine Corps, Programs and Resources, Program Analysis and Evaluation. Long title, and you may be thinking to yourself a couple of basic questions. You know, what do we consider data readiness? From our perspective, that is making data available to the analysts and decision makers, quality data. And a second question, why is this within the Programs and Resources office? So we are the money folks for the Marine Corps. Why would we be doing data readiness? The answer to that really gets to the role of my particular office. Program Analysis and Evaluation has an independent evaluator role across the Headquarters Marine Corps. We look at a lot of large-scale studies. We pull in a lot of data, look across all programs, so where we spend money is where we look, so that's basically everywhere. In conducting those analyses over a period of several years now, I've led one myself, and my office has been a part of many others. Data readiness or available data, quality data has been a real challenge, and that's why my office was stood up to mitigate those challenges.
Good morning. It's morning, right? My name is Marvin Carr. I'm a proud member of President Obama's digital startup. So I'm in the Chief Technology Office at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, where I advise Megan Smith, who is the U.S. CTO, on STEM education and diversity. The work that I particularly work on is how do we bring more opportunities? How do we open the full power of the American government with opportunities in the digital world by closing the digital divide and talking about digital dividends and really, really changing the lives of all Americans.
Morning, I'm Dave Bennett. I'm the Director of Implementation and Sustainment within the Defense Information Systems Agency. Basically, my role is provide what we call the NIPRNet and the CIPRNet on a global basis, our classified and unclassified network that supports all of the military departments as well as the combatant commands scattered across the globe, as well as other federal agencies, et cetera. We also provide enterprise services and applications hosted in our 11 core data centers that are also scattered globally across the department. So we're more of a provider, if you will, in terms of supporting the entire Department of Defense if you want communications or if you want computing capability, as well as if you want particular applications at the enterprise level. So essentially, everything within the agency that goes out to a combatant command or an end user as part of the DoD infrastructure, my organization provides that on a day-to-day basis. So case in point, you may have heard of enterprise email. We have right now roughly 1.7 million subscribers just on the unclassified network. We run roughly 100,000 mobile devices against that infrastructure, as well as providing that core infrastructure for communications, both classified and unclassified.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. So in today's world, there certainly are a lot of digital innovations that vie for our attention. As someone mentioned before, it's almost dizzying the amount of new innovations and technologies that are out there that we can choose from to try to improve and to try not to fail. So from your perspective, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what technologies you're actually embracing and you see your teams maybe working with over the next short term, 6 to 12 months. Marvin?
So we interface with a lot of folks. But my particular role is in STEM education. I'm providing opportunities in STEM to many more Americans. So there are a lot of opportunities in educational technology. So the Department of Education, along with the White House and several other agencies, are really trying our best to how do we push out more innovation that really is as inclusive as possible. How do we touch as many people as possible through MOOCs, through other online resources, and how can we really use the influence and the support of the federal government, of the Office of the President, to ensure that these opportunities go to as many people as possible. For instance, I'm working closely with the My Brother's Keeper program. Has anyone heard of that? My Brother's Keeper? My Brother's Keeper is a White House initiative to really bring opportunities to close opportunity gaps for all Americans, but especially for young men of color. So some of the things that we're doing there, is particularly, we're calling it My Brother's Keeper STEM Plus. And so that was ways to using the online community, using technology and software development in 4 particular areas, and exposing young men to STEM, exposing them to the nation's labs through the internet and through other things, like NASA's doing amazing things with its outreach, and how do we get those young kids that we're exposing to STEM into training programs that are using these new MOOCs and these new approaches to online delivery? And how do we touch all these people, all these young people, in a way that wasn't possible 20 years ago through digital innovation? And it's by really going out there into the world and finding who's doing these amazing things, finding the computer scientists and the software companies that are making these amazing software education technologies, and really raising them up and sharing them with the country.
It's fantastic. Probably a lot of opportunities there that they wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. So, Randall, what kinds of areas are you looking at from an innovation perspective?
So we are, and I'm gonna go ahead and caveat this by saying that I'm going to talk to you mostly about the headquarters side, not the operational side, where there have been many innovations that have been brought in from the war effort. I will talk to you more again about the headquarters side. We have been experimenting, I think, within Headquarters Marine Corps and reaching out to big data technologies such as cloud computing, different analytics tools, visualization tools. So looking at what these could do to help our analytics side and improve our decision making. One particular initiative I think that I'd like to talk about, give just a little history behind it. As I said, my office has been running large-scale analytics for quite a while, and I've been doing that for about 6 years, and there's been a lot of frustration with a lot of manual processes, unavailable data. I see a few heads shaking, as you probably have experienced something similar within your own offices. And this past year, we had a lot of vendors that were coming to Headquarters Marine Corps. My office holds the money, so they come to our office, say, hey, we think we can help you with your data challenges. We think we have a product that can take your structured and unstructured data and make some sense out of it, support your decision making. And so instead of just running the manual process this year, we decided to also do a parallel proof of concept, if you will, a big data proof of concept. We had a Booz Allen Hamilton team that was serving, if I can borrow a phrase from a previous speaker, as our vanguard to help us into the digital world. What should we do? Where should we go? See what's really value added to the senior leadership. And we ran this process in parallel. We set up a solutions architecture that included some things like the cloud infrastructure, a data management where we had Hortonworks, a Vormetric type of encryption ability, and also some applications to help with the analytics and visualization, SAS, Tableau, R. So basically open source and commercial across the board, a mix of those. With this particular proof of concept, we think we got a lot of value added to introducing the digital world to the senior Marine Corps leadership. As you're probably aware, most of them didn't grow up in the digital age. They are less familiar in many cases, and so uncomfortable, just to be frank. And so this introduced the concept of big data, data science, to that level of leadership. And we think we got some value added out of the analyses as well. So took that forward, had some success, and felt like the proof of concept really paid for itself.
Outstanding. So, and David, if possible, DISA probably is tempted by more technology than even the other agencies out there. I'm sure you have people knocking on your door every day trying to tell you about the latest and greatest. Out of that cacophony of new technology, what technologies do you see as being viable for you to actually adopt over the short term?
So if there's a buzzword out there today from an IT perspective, we're probably looking at it and looking at some way of incorporating it, whether you're talking about mobility, you're talking about cloud services, you're talking about big data, you're talking about analytics, and the list goes on. Security being one of them. I mean, we were talking about IA and ATOs and security just a few minutes ago. So we're playing in all of those spaces, and each of those have their own individual issues. The problem that we have with those technologies is we don't have one user community. Well, you say, well, you're supporting DoD. Well, DoD is not one organization, and everybody comes to the fight with their own set of equities, concerns, priorities, et cetera, as well as requirements. And we have to look at the technology to say, how do we support that broad array of user needs and do it in a way that's effective, cost efficient, as well as secure. So if you talk about mobility, yes, we're putting mobility out there as a way of extending the individual's freedom of maneuver, and use of capability in their environment, both in unclassified and classified, leveraging Android as well as iOS devices out at the end user perspective. We're leveraging big data right now in terms of standing up big data capability to support understanding what's happening across our networks. If you talk, one of the constraints, if you will, right now from my perspective, we don't have enough analytics as well as enough people who understand how to interpret the analytics to say, what's all this data tell me? And look at it from a way that really tells us where we need to go and what the issues are we're dealing with. We have more of a focus right now of looking at where we were, or yeah, that was an issue yesterday from a data perspective. So we got to look more forward from that perspective. Security is one of the things that I think everybody talks about, but I'm not sure we put enough focus on it. And I'll tell you quite frankly, I've been a program manager for a lot of years. I've developed a lot of joint solutions, et cetera. And I always talked about the security Nazis who are out there sort of driving security on the application, and it always impacted my ability to deliver things on schedule. But now that I'm sort of on the operational side of that, and I'm seeing all the things that are happening from a security-related perspective, the issue becomes more and more clear that if we don't look at security in a new and innovative way, then we're going to miss the bubble. Right now, you know, case in point, we look at IAVAs as a way of securing devices. We look at it and say, have you patched today? Have you patched against all the Microsoft weekly updates? Have you done this? Have you done that? And we say, yeah, we've done it to the extent we can, but we'll never be completely patched, et cetera. We will never get ahead of that curve from a cyber perspective. we've got to change the model. We've got to look at things differently from an innovative perspective, and we got to take the man out of the middle, if you will, and we got to start being more predictive in terms of where the issues that we anticipate. And we've got to build that sort of Internet of Thing into the devices so that we build intelligence into the routers, into the switches, into the infrastructure that as they see the information or the data flowing across their networks, they ought to become aware of it. They ought to be able to start taking action against that data as opposed to waiting for an individual to interpret, if you will, assuming they understand everything they're seeing. We've got to get the devices to become more proactive in terms of taking immediate action to the issues that are coming forward. So from my perspective, that cyber awareness, if you will, and the measures we implement in an automated fashion, I don't mean man in the middle at all. We've got to get to a fully automated approach where it's sensed an issue and the machines have enough intelligence in it and they learn from that so that they can constantly adjust to the threat. The idea of static networks and static application infrastructure, et cetera, has got to change to be more dynamic. And that's being addressed right now in some respects through software-defined networks. But we've got to go broader than that and build that dynamic aspect across our entire architecture, if you will, so that as a threat becomes perceived or realized or even anticipated, we can flip a switch and change the entire network infrastructure from a logical perspective and have a totally different environment that may have been, somebody may have scanned yesterday's network. Tonight I flip a switch and then tomorrow the whole network looks totally different. So, lending their scan totally irrelevant. So it's that piece of the puzzle that we're really trying to put a lot of effort on is how do we understand that cyberspace and be more proactive as opposed to looking behind.
Mm-hmm. Well, security is certainly at the top of everyone's list. You don't want to be on the front page of the Washington Post, certainly, and which is really a barrier for innovation. So, how do you go about balancing wanting to innovate versus the security implications and so forth? And is it really more of a technology issue or is it a organizational issue, would you say? Randall, what are your experiences around that?
Sure. I will say that there's the obvious security concerns when you talk about classified versus unclassified data that the Marine Corps itself would need to deal with. Then there are also issues where we are introducing new environments, the big data proof of concept. We introduced an environment, a cloud infrastructure that made our C4, if you will, our IT folks very uncomfortable. What are you doing? Why is this data outside of the Marine Corps network? How are you securing it? There is, I think, a lot that we need to come, honestly, to DISA and build a relationship there with a little more of what they have been doing in ensuring security. My personal experience is it's largely a political limitations, if you will. Security is used sometimes as an excuse across different organizations within DoD, and I say that carefully, I guess. Sometimes as an excuse not to share data. If we are all within the network and approved to operate, the security should be less of an issue. However, there are still the unclassified versus classified domains.
Mm-hmm. And David, when it comes to doing those things at DISA, you have so many plates spinning at the same time that you have to manage from a security versus innovation perspective. What have you found to be the process that you've found works to go through to actually get things accomplished?
Well, that's a very loaded question, because some will say we're too slow, and I'll have to admit, yeah, we are. The problem we run into is if I break my world down into an infrastructure and an end-user services perspective, the infrastructure I can evolve relatively quickly from the standpoint of a new router comes out, I can swap that router out, I can change what my boundary protection devices look like, et cetera. So we can innovate the infrastructure relatively quickly. The problem we run into from a delivery perspective is, from a DoD perspective, whether you're talking Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, et cetera, or even DoD combatant command capabilities, typically these are capabilities that have been developed over decades of time. I mean, Very seldom do you see new programs. You always hear in the news about this new program. Those are on the eaches, but we have this inventory of applications that are running in our data centers. I mean, we're talking thousands of applications, some as old as 20, 30 years old, that have basically, in many cases, not really changed much since the days they were developed, because they run good, they're doing what they're supposed to do, they're crunching numbers, and so nobody spends a lot of time and effort in taking them and innovating them to that next level. So an obstacle really is, how do you take a 20-year-old COBOL program running on a mainframe and say, I want to go to the cloud? You know, that becomes the issue, and then people say, well, why aren't you moving to the cloud fast enough? Well, okay, number one, I don't own the program, but secondly, that system is running as it should, if you will. It's doing everybody's paycheck. So just to give you an idea, across the entire DoD, I've got this one application generating everybody's paycheck. Now, do you really want me to mess with that while it's running and say, let's move it to the cloud because I think I can gain some efficiencies there? Those become the politics that play in. And while innovative may be a good thing to move forward, the practicality and the reality of being able to do that and having the dollars to do that, because change requires dollars as well as the right mindset. And it's depending on communities, depending on what the application is, you have to look at those on the eaches and say, can I move this capability? Is it something that really should move forward and be innovative, et cetera? So there's a constant trade-off back and forth to say, how do I leverage technology, and how do I do it in the right way, the most beneficial way, the most cost-effective way, that I gain efficiencies, I gain effectiveness without impacting current operations? Because none of this, you know, from a certain perspective, this becomes a theoretical discussion. I've got this new capability, so let's move there. That's all well and good until you put it into application and say, how do I take these 4,000 applications and now just say, okay, move everything to the cloud? It just doesn't work. It makes no sense. And so we have to take that jaundiced view to say, how do I incorporate, look at the new technology, understand it, understand what it means to my application and how I can apply it, and then make value decisions to say, let me move this in the right way to take advantage of those new capabilities. And so that becomes sort of the impediment to how fast we move, because folks want to look at it, understand it, and DoD is a very risk-averse organization if you haven't figured that part out yet. And so we tend to look at risk more than we do how fast can we jump.
Just to add to that, so I think, so I'm a computer scientist and electrical engineer by training, but in the government, I've kind of more focused on the human aspect of things. And one thing that we forget, and I won't touch on the security question for obvious reasons, right? But one thing that we forget is data isn't just numbers. And that's one thing that's come back to me since I've been at the White House. Data isn't just numbers. Data isn't just zeros and ones. That every piece of data is connected to a living American that we have. And at some point, I feel the need for, in this conversation, for us to leverage, the difference, leverage security and opportunities in people's lives. Like at some point, innovation and security, we have to figure out how the two match, because innovation really just helps people's life. It isn't about numbers. We're not changing or securing, just databases. And so I think that's one thing that we often miss in government, and really in industry as well. We sell data like it's just ones and zeros, but these are people's lives. These are actual living people. And so that's how I've kind of changed the way I look at data, which is why the security aspect is so important. So we're not just securing zeros and ones, we're securing people's futures, we're securing people's lives and opportunities. And so that's why it's so important to fix the security issues so that we can innovate. I think innovation is very important moving forward.
Oh, without a doubt. And then finally, I'll open this up to all the panelists. One thing the Obama administration, I think, will be remembered for is its concentration and focus on technology. And some of the firsts that have come about during the administration, things like the first federal CIO, the Open Data Initiative, the Cloud First strategy. Out of all of those that the administration has done, and then beyond that have come out of Silicon Valley and the rest of the world, can you leave the audience with kind of the one in a greenfield environment, the one new technology that's come along that has really piqued your interest, whether you've started to embrace it internally or not, what do you see the real, the one innovative thing that really has caught your attention? David?
I would probably say this idea of the Internet of Things, and I'm just starting to grapple with it in my own head in terms of what does that mean from a DoD perspective. And it kind of goes back to my point earlier from a security perspective relative to the infrastructure. I need machines that talk to machines and pass information and have enough intelligence within them to be able to react to situations, because we've got to be able to react at the speed of electrons, not at the speed of somebody's hand and eye coordination speeds, if you will. And the only way we're going to do that is leveraging this sort of Internet of Things where I've got machines understanding, realizing what's going on, and talking to another machine. So from a network perspective, I have the entire network talking across the board from an intelligence perspective. And I don't mean things like routing tables. That's all static information, and that information is out there, et cetera. But I'm really talking about from a cyber perspective, understanding what's happening when a machine encounters some kind of malware that the signature is out there or close to a signature. They understand it, they see it, they react to it, they build a little intelligence out of that, if you will. They learn from it, and then they pass that information on to the other devices. So they say, hey, here's a new signature I'm starting to see, be aware of it, et cetera, and then take some type of reactive step relative to it. So I think that is an area that we've got to really pay a lot of attention to and focus on in my mind. And from a vendor perspective, a lot of meetings I've had with Cisco and several of the other big infrastructure providers, if you will, that intelligence in the devices, in my mind, is really where we've got to go so that we start making them sort of proactive pieces of the infrastructure and not just sort of traffic passers, if you will, that are sitting there looking at and passing one thing from left to the right. So I'd say that aspect of Internet of Things from an infrastructure perspective.
Excellent, thank you. Marvin?
I'm going to have to agree with David, but on the other end of the spectrum. So along with the Internet of Things, we have this Smart Cities initiative. And so not only using the Internet of Things and sensors to measure and to secure networks and our technology, but you can use the Internet of Things to measure communities, right? You can see the pulse, you can see the life, you can see the lifeblood, you can see what's wrong with entire cities by using sensors. So everything from the utilities to people walking up pathways, smart pathways, to the school buses. And so everything can be connected. And so what can we do in the next 20 years to really use the Internet of Things to touch really the hearts of our communities, to be sure that our communities are working as efficient as possible. And so it isn't always about the technology. The technology is important, but how can we use this technology to make cities and communities more efficient? And just using data, right? Using these data science approaches to help to create a more inclusive community and see where the problems are.
It's almost mind-boggling what the Internet of Things might mean to us. Randall, finally?
So I'll stay on the Internet of Things theme here for just a second to say that I think that could provide a lot of value for especially our ground equipment within the Marine Corps. There's obviously the newer end items that are being manufactured will have a lot more connectivity and network capabilities. However, being able to capture that data, capture the right amount of the data, and be able to use that to help us with operations and sustainment of the equipment across its entire life cycle be a critical piece. I also want to jump into another area where we are looking to go, at least in the next few years, and that is what we've termed a ready data environment. So as coming from the analytic community, our idea is, wouldn't it be great if we could get our hands around all this data and take a look at it? So creating an environment in which we can do that, which would include some type of maybe a landing spot or cloud infrastructure somewhere for the data to be stored and accessible, a data management layer, if you will, to allow us to use structured, unstructured data, something that's scalable to reach all our end users, and then an applications layer, if you will, on top of that to allow the users to define what their business intelligence looks like, what different analytic tools they need to use. that environment we are initiating the planning for at this point in time, and probably will be carrying that out, assuming the resources and others, other personnel are in place over the next few years.
Fantastic. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right, you guys, if you move, you're going to lose your seat. I'm just telling you now. Got to keep it real. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That was awesome. Thank you for the outline. Is my mic live? I know I'm loud, but I don't think all right. So our next speaker is going to be talking about the digital and human touch. He is Vice President of the Strategic Innovation Group at Booz Allen. Please put your hands together and welcome Bill Ott.
We'll let everybody get settled here for a minute. Is that working? It's good? All right. Goldie, thank you for the kind introduction. Wow, it's been an inspiring morning today, and it's great to be here and see everybody here. So as Goldie said, my name is Bill Ott. I'm a Vice President with Booz Allen Digital. Alongside Julie, who spoke earlier today, I lead a group of technologists who are working with our clients to open their performance and tackle some of their more difficult challenges with innovative digital solutions. We've learned a lot from each other today, and my goal or hope is that we can continue the dialogue well into the future. We've spoken a lot of open technology and systems that are speeding us to new connections, new value, and new opportunities. I'll echo the earlier sentiments. It's a really exciting time to be part of digital. But in this world of cloud, social, mobile apps, it's really easy to get lost in the technical details of it all. They're interesting, the technologies are challenging, they're important, and frankly, like Naveen and Manjeet, they're fun to geek out with. But at the risk of sounding alarmist, none of the technology challenges that we discuss today, tomorrow, or well into the future compare to the cultural challenges that each of our organizations face to keep up with change, and change is moving faster and faster, as we all know. Simply put, it's easier to change our organizational tools than it is to change our culture and mindsets. So I like to talk about people, because none of what we're trying to collectively achieve with digital is possible without communication, without integration, and without open collaboration. None of this is possible without enterprise collaboration. And I mean this in both micro and macro terms. Micro within the teams that we participate in, and macro collaboration across enterprises or team of teams that we all lead. So I'd like to spend a few minutes exploring this idea of why digital really needs people to work. For me, this concept of digital and human collaboration across an enterprise has three core parts. It's iterative, it's automated, and it's continuous, and I'd like to talk about each now. First, collaboration needs to be iterative. What do I mean by that? So if you've ever worked on a software development project like I have, you've been there. Typically, a requirements analyst will go out and interview users, write down their needs in some specification document, email that document off to the developers who are hiding out in their cave somewhere. The developers will crank out code for 3 to 6 months, come out of their cave and ship it off to production, who then tries to deploy the code. Well, the results are usually the same. The code is difficult to deploy, there's numerous bugs and issues, or maybe despite what the users said they wanted, the software doesn't really deliver what they truly needed. So, thus, the finger pointing between the teams begins, and an us versus them mentality is born. Contrary to popular belief, the development and delivery of underwhelming software rarely has anything to do with tools and technology. It has everything to do with a lack of collaboration, a lack of communication that went into its production. It's a cultural problem, It happens when siloed teams focus on their fiefdoms and not the overall product and not the overall user experience. It happens when teams don't work together or trust each other. So it's not a trick. We're all on the same team. Developers shouldn't be rewarded for cranking out lots of code. Production shouldn't be punished when something's wrong in production. Instead, the team should be rewarded when the product experience is awesome and the user experience is awesome. And oh, by the way, when people actually use it. This demands teams to have better manners. It requires trust and insightful discussions. It requires truly listening to others' opinions. It requires us to override the traditional siloed approach and reboot culture to be truly a collaborative software delivery process. This idea of teams, of respecting teams and having them have a say in your work is the core foundational principle of DevOps that's been mentioned a couple times today. So for those interested in DevOps but maybe not sure what it is, let me explain. So the core goal of DevOps is to reduce the time to market to deliver new software. More importantly, to deliver new value to users. Much of the conversation today about DevOps in the market is all about the tools and automating everything. As Naveen and Dr. Carr mentioned, I think that's missing the point. DevOps is about changing the culture of how we work together to deliver software. Rather than developers shipping over their code to production and both pointing fingers when it doesn't work, the teams work as an integrated unit from day one, executing short sprints to release software very quickly, typically weekly, with the goal of getting feedback and identifying issues so that they can be resolved immediately. If you're looking to transform how you do software delivery in your organization to incorporate some of these DevOps concepts, my recommendation before you go out and buy any tools is to talk to folks that truly understand that DevOps is a cultural movement. I know anybody on my team is happy to talk about it. Secondly, my suggestion is to start small, start with small bites, something manageable, a pilot project that can demonstrate value incorporating these new concepts to both the users as well as to the broader enterprise. Changing communication and building trust between teams can be challenging. So I recommend starting with a team that's already working together, that's already co-located. It's much easier to collaborate if people are already working together, if they know each other, and they can interact face to face. Today, Booz Allen has teams, DevOps teams, that are working across geographies, across time zones, using tools like Slack and other digital collaboration tools, but we had to build up to that. It took time. Remember, changing mindsets is far harder than changing an organization's tools. The ideas of departments and teams building fiefdoms is out of style. Us versus them attitudes is yesterday. We're all supposed to be on the same team, going after the same mission after all. We all need to remember that the user experience and the products and services that we deliver is the most important thing. Second, collaboration should be automated. As Julie suggested earlier, one thing organizations can do to really improve collaborations internally is make an investment to build both physical and digital intersections within their organization, between communities, between the people, between workflows, and between technology. These intersections, internal intersections, can connect work with play, can connect ideas and solutions, and can connect people with technology. Over time, collaboration becomes automatic. Over time, collaboration becomes the culture. At Booz Allen, we've defined programs to build key collaboration skills, such as user-centered design. We've launched team-based competitions and hackathons. We've recognized outstanding team collaborations in company-wide publications. And we've pushed staff to rotate in and out of projects to get experience working with different teams. if you want to inspire people, you have to encourage them to try new things. You have to make it a habit. You have to drive strategy through culture, not through process. Management guru Peter Drucker said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And it's this environment, an environment that we all want to work in, built off a collaborative culture that attracts excellence and gets people talking and sharing ideas. However, automating internal collaboration often isn't enough. We need to get people involved in bigger ideas. It's only when it becomes automatic for our people to embrace and participate in external ecosystems that our organizations truly embrace the open movement. Look around us, we're all part of a global community. No one organization has a monopoly on great ideas. They're not locked up in some closed ecosystem. In my mind, this is probably the best part of the open movement. We realize that communities are smarter, faster, more agile than individuals can be. So what do? We share our ideas, we open source our code, and when you dip yourself in the bits and bytes of an open community, you come out smarter and more agile with higher quality software than you did before. Earlier, Julie spoke about the value Booz Allen got from open sourcing Project Jellyfish, our cloud broker platform. I'd like to give you another example. Some government agencies are starting to purchase embracing this new culture. 18F, who's represented well here today, is helping to change the government in this area. On a recent, and I should say an active agile delivery service procurement, we didn't write the traditional 100-page tech volume that we often have. We wrote code. We demonstrated our credentials by developing an app that we called LabelCraft. LabelCraft is a web app with the goal of improving the reported side effects on drug labels through crowdsourcing. We assembled it by tapping into open data from the FDA, built upon open source software from existing repositories. The interesting part here is that 18F wasn't testing LabelCraft per se, even though there were some really cool and smart submissions. They were testing how we collaborated, our team's culture, and how we went about the process to build the actual software. So if it isn't already, DevOps is going to be the cultural future that agencies purchase against. The third and last point I want to make is that collaboration needs to be continuous. As others have alluded to throughout the day, software today is a 24/7, around-the-clock industry. Technology is accelerating the speed and rate of connections, and there's no customer, no business leader, or no software team that wants to wait for the next release. So take recreation.gov, for example. It's the federal government's platform for making reservations at over 90,000 national parks, wildlife refuges, and other national recreation areas. The government wants people to explore and experience the great wonders that America has to offer, from Yosemite to the National Monument and everything in between. However, the technology to explore those today is difficult to navigate. So the government has created an opportunity for a new kind of collaboration. The new vehicle requires an agile approach that's focused on enhanced communication amongst all the parties involved to make recreation.gov an awesome experience. I have no doubt it's going to be, but the successful partners who will be those whose cultural mindsets are able to turn on a dime and always be shipping. Recreation.gov is a great example of an enterprise challenge that needs people to think differently about how they collaborate. It's a challenge that has the potential to transform how we as Americans and our visitors, how we dream, plan, experience, and share those experiences of our national wonders with our friends and family. But a traditional approach, software development approach, and closed software could ruin that experience. So the question is, how do we, as leaders, provision a culture that is able to cope with continuous delivery at an enterprise scale? To start with, executives like us need to model these behaviors and offer sponsorship for new collaborative approaches. It is us who can provide the leadership. It is us who can offer the reassurances that we want and expect greater collaboration across our teams. It is us who can be the mentors. We're not mentoring the technical details. We mentor the leadership, the collaboration, the trust, and the respect that we expect. And it is us who can set the measurable goals that we want our teams to aim for. Goals such as delivering an awesome product experience, reducing time to market, improving quality at the same time, and bringing the fun back into software delivery. All of these goals can only be achieved by revamping culture, not technology. And lastly, checkpoints. As leaders instilling new ways of working, we're asking a lot from our teams. We'll build better products faster, but changing cultural norms is a very challenging thing. So when you set checkpoints for your team, set them high. But more importantly, remember, when your teams win, celebrate success with them. We're all people after all. Take it from me, you can see success in teams who have rebooted their culture to keep pace with their missions. You can see it in the way they lead. You can see it in the way they collaborate. You can see it in the products and services that they deliver to their users or stakeholders. Our clients need us to change the way we deliver software across an enterprise. It's what they've come to expect. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill, and the Booz Allen team for being absolutely awesome to work with. Take your seats because you don't want to miss what's coming next. We have our closing session. Anybody who doesn't have a seat, take a seat. This is what you came here for. This is the awesome sauce that I promised you. Trust me. Trust me. Yeah, stakes are high, Ann and Greg. All right, I'm going to wait for everyone to take their seats. This is the best of the day. And it's been a crazy good day, hasn't it? How's it been, everybody? We've had an amazing lineup of wonderful speakers, but we saved something special for the end. All right. Our next speakers are going to be talking about building the modern CIO office. Please join me in giving a super warm welcome to Ann Duncan, CIO of EPA, and Greg Godbout, CTO of EPA.
I'm going to see if I get it comfortable.
Yeah, right. You're too formal.
Right. All right.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Wow, bright.
So we said we're going to have a conversation about the modern CIO's office. So we thought we'd start by just telling you our backgrounds, and then we're going to ask each other some questions, and we will see where it goes. We don't have it planned. I see some of our EPA folks out there. Thanks for coming, folks. Hope it's not entirely because you don't know what we're talking about yet. What are they going to say? I don't know.
Who's Greg?
That's right. All right. So I'm Ann Duncan, CIO at EPA, as Goldie said, and thank you, Goldie, for setting the bar really high. And my background before coming to EPA, I worked at Hewlett-Packard for 20 years, and after I left and I worked at HP in all sorts of areas, including IT, but also R&D and other areas. And then I worked for Palo Alto School District in California for 5 years as my introduction to government work before I came to EPA. Greg?
My name is Greg Godbout. I've worked in software, mostly software development. My background's as a coder for about 17 plus years. That's had me working for a number of companies. I spent most of my career as a consultant, we would call like a firefighter. I would go in and turn around failed projects and things like that. I eventually became a federal employee because of the Presidential Innovation Fellows program. I was a second round or a 2013 Presidential Innovation Fellow, and that put me at GSA, where I was paid for by SBA, sat at GSA,
but worked mostly with OFPP. And what I did was innovation in procurement. The team I was with, I don't know if Aaron Snow spoke earlier, but Aaron and I were on the same team, and it was the innovation procurement team. We took over a product called RFP Easy, and we were taking over the learning lessons of that and what would come next. And we developed a concept that we called Schedule 70B at the time. This was a little while back. And that led to working with many innovators at GSA, including Naveen, sitting up front there. And we founded a group called 18F at GSA. And so I was the original executive director of 18F. And about October of last year, a group of the founders got together and we started talking about how do we make change occur faster. And we came up with the concept we need to go inside the agencies and place teams there and things like that. And that led me to a personal sort of exploration that eventually I decided I wanted to go into a CIO's office. Now that we've set up 18F and it was going to scale, I wanted to go inside a CIO's office somewhere. And in a tour I was doing of the leaders in government, I got to meet Anne and the head of EPA, and I felt like this was a great place to do that. So now I'm inside the CIO's office. Anne's my direct boss, so I'll keep my questions polite, maybe, I guess. But we're very much, the thing that's exciting that's happened at EPA that we're going to get to, and we talk about a modern CIO's office, the thing that excited me, that drew me there, it's actually becoming a digital services organization, all of EPA. And there's reasons for that, and we'll get to that in the questions. But that drew me there. I was excited, and I also get to still work with my friends at GSA and 18F as we're using their services to stand up another 18F, but inside an agency. So.
Well, Greg, I was going to actually start by asking you why you came to EPA. But so you see, we rehearsed this a lot.
Well, no, I mean, there's a little more to it. I would say that I thought I was going to be in government for 6 months. In fact, I promised my family I would be in government for 6 months. That's how long the PIF program was for when my round. But the opportunity was too exciting. I mean, the mission is too great. I don't know if you guys follow Daniel Pink, but it's like what motivates people, and it's so true. And we've seen it play out at 18F. But it's essentially mission, mastery, and autonomy. And government has mission better than anybody else. It's very difficult to leave government and go back to making a website that connects people to have like social meetings or something like that. It's exciting, that's great, but it's not the same, right? And certainly EPA, the environment, human health, things like that, that drove me to continuing. And I think because of the size, the impact is good. But I felt like at EPA we could tackle the culture problem, which was so eloquently described by, I'm sorry, I forget his name, but the Booz Allen guy who was speaking. I think that I couldn't pass it up. I felt like one day I'll be old and retired somewhere. Hopefully I become old and retired. And I'm looking back, I would think, did I miss an opportunity to really go after the hard things and change the hard things? And I knew at EPA we had a commitment of people who wanted to do that. I love the mission. My daughter told me to go, and then I'm at EPA.
That's right. That's right. That when his daughter says, "Daddy, are you changing the environment today?" Right? Are you fixing the environment today?
Right.
Yeah.
So my first question for you is sort of similar. It's a little bit different though because you joined the public sector as a significant part of your career early on. And why did you join the public sector? I mean, you went from Hewlett-Packard, you could have gone anywhere.
Yeah, well, it was similar to what you said, Greg. I left Hewlett-Packard and I was sort of looking for something a little more mission-driven, right? And, HP was great, particularly the first 10 years I was there, more great than the last 10 years I was there. Anyone who knows HP's history goes, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Or if you laugh.
She was at HP, that is.
That's right. We can list the CEOs, but we won't go there. All right, so it was, I got tired of my job being to get people to print more pages and use more ink. And so when I went to school district, it was a great opportunity to see really making a difference for kids. And EPA is an opportunity to take that and expand it to the entire country, and in fact, arguably the world, because EPA impacts the environment of the entire world. The environment doesn't do borders very well. It's not like, oh, well, your smoke, your pollution stops right there. Doesn't happen that way. So, and I felt like, as you said, EPA has an opportunity to really change the culture and to bring in modern practices. So it's funny because, East Coast and West Coast are very different, but Greg and I have very similar philosophies about doing innovation and making innovation happen in EPA. So Greg, tell me, what I think people are really probably curious about is the difference in the model between EPA and 18F, where you came from. So there's a very clear difference in what we're doing. Can you tell people about that?
Yeah, so when we were, first of all, I love this saying, and I hope this resonates, but it's follow the terrain, not the map, right? You really have to listen and see where you are to see what you're going to develop. So when we were looking to do IT improvement across the federal government, and I was working as a Presidential Innovation Fellow, and the idea of us standing up an 18F, which wasn't called 18F, it had like 5 names, and we finally got fed up and we were on the corner of 18th and F Street and said, let's just call it 18F. And that's a true story. We locked ourselves in a room and that was it. We were like, we were not leaving without a name. So, but as we were building that, we're at GSA. This is the government's largest fee-for-service agency, right? It's a service agency. It really hit home. I'm a small business owner. I own the Arlington Cinema and Draft House, and I'm very much a small business minded thinker. So to me, this made a lot of sense. Why I stayed was here we can build a business, and we will exist if people want the service. If they don't want the service, you shut it down. So 18F is a services organization. It is paid for by the services it provides. And then we took a model that we wanted to be, it was about change. So to work with 18F, you had to agree to certain terms and certain things. But 18F is really a very narrow and specific target. It was by design. First, we started building a production floor. And like all production floors, if you're hiring developers, you don't want to say that we code in every language, right? We sort of picked languages that were open source on the forefront, which also puts us in the place of highly customized software design. This is not where we build email systems. This is not where we build networks. We don't, do everything. And a lot of people think of 18F as sort of that does all these things. It's very, very specific, targeted to a specific set of software development. And the other thing we wanted to be was like what I would call like bleeding edge, not cutting edge. We wanted to be on the very edge, like pushing as far as possible. And we wanted people to copy 18F. It wasn't like we wanted to be the services group for all of government. We wanted to sort of have people spin off other versions of it, which is really, if you think about it, we're in a federated government. There should be 1,000 different cultures. It's not like one culture that you bring into government that's gonna fix it. You need multiple ones, and you gotta cultivate them, and they do things differently. And so 18F, went after the delivery of services to mostly citizen-facing ones, but also internal employee-facing, government employee-facing ones. But then you come over to EPA, and I often tell people we're setting up an 18F inside EPA, and it's very true, except the big difference there is we have to take care of the whole organization, right? It's not, we're not there to be the specialists that you bring in to help deliver on one aspect. We also have to take care of keeping the lights on. Right? There's all the operations side of the CIO, and this really gets to the modern CIO's office. And one gap that I saw, and I don't know if others saw it, but I think that there's a lot of CIO offices that are like IT departments in the federal government, that they focus on classic like hardware and networking and all of these things. But what about mission delivery? Like, this is the whole important reason. This is why I'm at EPA. That's why my daughter, she said, Dad, go save the environment, right? And I can't save the environment, but there's people at EPA that can, and I can help them work faster and better, right? That's my job. And so we're really about lean startup methodologies, bringing that practice. And it may seem strange from a technology standpoint to be talking about that, but it's really a modern CIO's office that we're building at 18F is not about technology per se. I'm sorry, at EPA, thank you. It's not about technology per se. It's essentially interwoven into the mission, or if we were in a company, I'd say the business value that we provide. And that's what we're doing there. So how does 18F help us there? Like, they help us stand up the program-facing, mostly software development or cloud-based projects that are happening that are really mission-driven projects. we have a whole operation, you know, the next question I'll throw your way, that is really focused on operations. And the question I have for you as I get there, and this is, I think, the discussion I would love to hear people having all over the place, is how do we blend the two? I think that there is a silo in IT and government, an internal silo, and it's a silo of what's being called digital services, which is generally around software deployment and development, and operations. And when you talk about DevOps, right, that's the two blended. I would argue that in an organization like EPA, DevOps also includes a scientist. It also includes HR, acquisitions, financing, budget, and all that. We'll get to that later. But why, how do you blend? How do you have, we have a going concern, legacy systems, we have operations, all this stuff. How do we blend that with a new demand of prove your value to the mission?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's our challenge, right? Is how do we make this all part of the mission? And a big chunk of that is that we're bringing in these people that Greg's creating this innovation fellowship with our HR folks that are going to be embedded in our program teams. But then when the program teams aren't just going to operate in the old way. They're going to operate in new ways using innovative solutions. They're going to use Agile, they're going to use DevOps, and they're going to be engaging on a day-to-day basis the folks who are already there in our operations team. So, for example, if you look across the spectrum, you have a project like eManifest, which we've been working on, and we're right now building on the production floor at 18F. This is a project that we just got started doing development on. We're going to be adding other development teams from other vendors, but ultimately, our organization has the responsibility for integrating that, for integrating all the code that comes in from the various development teams, and for making sure that we choose our operations platform. We're becoming our own cloud services broker. So we decide internally where everything goes, and then we operate that, whether we operate on premise or we manage a provider in the cloud. And so those operations folks have to be intimately involved in the programs in a way they weren't before, right? Because it's not just the program throws something over the wall at you after 4 years of development at the developer's shop, or in fact, you never even see it because the mission stuff is still sitting out the developer shop even after it's operational. All that stuff comes in and runs through our shop, and people are intimately engaged with the mission in a way they've never been before. So Greg, I'm going to throw a question back at you, a little different, because I think we really want to talk about this, and I want to make sure we don't run out of time, is the enterprise. You guys are doing some very, very cool things with the enterprise and with, particularly with Lean Startup and AB funding. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so when I went on my tour of talking with leaders from other agencies, one of the topics that EPA, you, and Stan, who's our deputy administrator, were all in the room, we talked about the importance of e-enterprise. And e-enterprise, to a lot of people on the outside, it sounded like a technology program, but it wasn't. And it isn't. It's really a new way of working. And fundamentally, if you're in a CIO's office, or you're part of 18F, or you're part of some digital services team, and you're delivering on IT services, inevitably you run into multiple business processes that should be changed. It's just inevitable. In fact, I would argue that most of your savings in money is actually on the business process change side than necessarily as a tool side. And it's very difficult in the federal government when the habits have been, it takes so long to acquire and then build software, years, 3 to 4 years in many cases, that the business side hasn't been sharpening its tools, right? It just sits back and goes, we got funding, everybody. We got 4 years to deliver on a rulemaking or something. You got tons of time to deliver on your side of it. But now that we're changing that, right? Now that we're changing that to delivery in weeks and months and people having to get involved, where do you go to change the business side? And this is what e-enterprise is about. It's essentially the new way of working for EPA. And what really excited me about it was a recognition that they needed to create a new culture, a new space, which they call, consider it a program, which they call e-enterprise. and it's run out of the CFO's office, and I get to sit on the executive board of eEnterprise. And for me, it's totally fascinating because we're aligning everything we're doing from a digital services movement all the way to operations hardware, completely straight through to the business side. And it's things like they had these scoping teams, right? Now these scoping teams were going out and building pilots. Now what's exciting about these little pilots is the teams were made up of both states and federal employees. So this is how the EPA works, right? There's a lot of grants that flow through EPA, it goes to states. The states do a lot of the implementation of environmental protection. So to talk about environmental protection but just talk about EPA is really disingenuous. It's the whole thing. So these teams are working. Well, before they were saying just like classically like, okay, team, tell us your ROI up front, do all this stuff. And we came in and said, well, what about lean startup methodologies? Let's let them like just prototype something, see what the value is, right? And we'll call that A funding. And then B funding will be when we've determined what an MVP, a minimum viable product, should be. And then you get funding to build out the minimum viable product. And if that minimum viable product works, then you get your C funding, and it's some programs adopting you permanently. And EPA is rolling this out right now. So we're talking about lining finance, budget, everybody completely aligned with mission delivery. And you could just replace IT or innovation, and this could be about acquisitions, right? It'd be the same story. Like, how do we align acquisitions with mission delivery? How do we align hiring with mission delivery? And eEnterprise is this place on the business side that we can go to get those business processes changed in an innovative way. So it's really exciting. It's digital services, eEnterprise, and then when I got there, Ann was already in the midst of a reorg of the CIO's office to modernize it. And so those three things converged. And so I would ask, in the midst of eEnterprise, in the midst of digital services, why the reorg? I was coming in and fell into it. It was great, but why were you doing the reorg?
So the reorg, there are probably 3 or 4 reasons, or there are a bunch of reasons. We'll go 3 or 4 of them. So most importantly, we talked to people across the agency, and customer experience was important. People didn't know how to get things done in our organization, OEI. So we wanted to make it so that they could figure out how to get things done, where to get things done, and how to achieve results and have a good partnership. So that's number 1. Number 2 is really about flattening the organization and simplifying the organization, because it hadn't changed for 15 years since the organization was created. And in outside the government, that's like 12 reorgs, right? So you really want to take a look and see where the organization should be now, and then really trying to create some new synergies. And one of the reasons we hired Greg was we had this idea of doing something that looked like digital services. Although the initial idea I had, admittedly, was very much in the way of an 18F model. It was a group all in one office.
Here's a question. Why did you hire me? why go through that punishment?
Well, why did I hire you? Gosh, let me think of, no, I was kidding. So I hired Greg because he had a vision and the ability to execute the concepts execute my vision. We shared a vision, and he had the tools and the time to execute them, right? So I can say, I want to create a new culture in OEI and in EPA, but Greg, with his background, which is different than mine, both in the government and outside the government, is able to actually come in and do that execution. My last code I wrote was in Pascal. So the people are like, Pascal, what's that? I never heard of it. It was after COBOL. Yeah. So I'm not going to be the person who goes in and coaches teams, right? I'm not going to be the one on the ground. Greg is inspiring, and he didn't ask me this, so I could tell them this, although maybe he did. I don't know. Greg is inspiring to people, right? He comes in a room, like you get this room of people like this. Right. And by the time that he leaves, people are excited about the idea of digital services, of Agile, of DevOps. And so he's been able to get people excited about the mission, and his vision is really aligned with mine. So that's why I hired you. Okay.
Yeah, I asked because, I'm difficult, right?
Yeah, you are. It's true.
There is.
Yeah, I got a question for you before you continue. Okay. Because this is what everyone wants to know. Why won't you put on a suit, Greg?
I do own a suit. Notice I said one. There's one suit that I own. And that's when my mom begrudgingly goes, Greg, this event, you have to wear a suit. And I come to, no, I think that, I think part of the culture change that's needed is we have to stop sort of pretending. And this is not to say that people in the suits, you all dress very nice and lovely. I think it's fantastic. I think part of the pretending that happens in government is what I call, it's like we have a culture of like polite company. And I think that's fundamentally the problem with government. We don't tell each other when we disappoint each other. And because of that, you can have silos running around an agency, all disappointing each other, but awarding themselves and patting themselves on the back, right? And the results are, in my opinion, like deplorable in many cases. And we don't say that, and we don't talk that way. So I didn't feel like I should put on a suit because I felt like I'm not here in polite company. I'm sort of the antithesis of that, right? And
Sure.
So, but I do care, and genuinely, I'm not a jerk, right?
Well, he is not a jerk.
but I fundamentally, the thing that I measure myself on is, what did a lot of change happen around me? Did we change a lot of things? Because I didn't want to just come in and leave government, and it's what keeps me here is the excitement of all that change. So I think it's important sometimes to look that part, where you're not, going to look the same as everybody in that room, and everyone in the room says yes to each other, but nobody does anything for each other, right? I'm not interested in the yeses. I'm really more interested in what are you going to actually do and prove it, and hold people accountable for that.
Okay. Well, we are just about out of time. I'm not quite getting the hook, but it's probably as good a place as any to stop. So, so thank you, Greg. This was great.
Yeah. Is there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, just jump up and.
Here. Let's just make it happen. I hope it's working this time.
Thank you. I will ask a very direct question. And the previous panel mentioned about the future of the on the horizon IoT, and you talk about the modern CIO office. You have not mentioned about IPv6, and as the foundation for the future of the internet, and IoT will not be possible, and the future innovation will not be possible without the IP adoptions globally. I would like you to address that, and hopefully that's a very polite question.
It is a polite question, unless you're not prepared, but actually, so EPA is actually...
What's an IP?
Yeah. So EPA is actually in a really good space on IPv6 implementation. We're on track, and it is very important. In fact, when I was in Palo Alto, I was trying really hard. I had a huge block of IPv4 address spaces I was trying to sell while they were still valuable, but I didn't quite manage it. But yeah, we're in good shape in implementing IPv6.
Didn't IPv4 run out? They ran out of them just a few weeks ago or something like that, right?
They're all, well, they've run out a few times, but then people go, oh, look. So
we
maybe
found
those
some
ones,
in the corner.
yeah, maybe those ones in Palo Alto are still going to be
There's like a
value.
sofa of IP addresses
That's right.
that people reach out.
Exactly. So, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, someone else?
So just real quick, so you're talking about DevOps. So Agile is a reimagining of development so that it's a faster process and it's iterative. So DevOps is taking that wire to all of IT. But the piece that's missing is you bring in dev, you bring in operations, and you bring in security, is the PMO. And I say that because I'm in a PMO shop and I'm crying a lot. Because that piece is missing. The PMO is trying to make sure that things are going in an organized way. How do we bring the PMO so that it's not a hindrance? And it's a benefit for the process?
Yeah, so I would say our PMO is the driver of the process. So we're the organization that we've reorged that I am technically the head of right now. We're calling technical
Proposed organization.
Yeah, I guess it's not signed yet, so might not happen. But technical architecture and digital services is the name of the whole organization. And in it, we have two consultants. We have architecture consultants, and we have what I call business consultants, but are really like product or services consultants. And the two, the architect consultants and the business consultants, they go in to the programs to do evaluations and help them move, like, where are you today? Where do you need to be tomorrow? And that's really where the PMO sort of like that sort of consulting business and how you're going to work and do all this stuff. It stems from that. And then we get into now how does DevOps apply to you, and how does all the other services, a hiring service, we have a pilot team that'll go in and build things out quickly. We have an assisted acquisition services, which is modeled after the acquisition service that we had set up at 18F. So you have all of these services under this one organization that is all about best practices in managing and running projects. And so it all starts there. And the first question I ask everybody is, who's your single point of accountability on the domain side, and who's your single point of accountability on the technical side? And if you can't get past that question, we have a whole lot of discussions we need to have. So,
Very good. All right, put your hands together for Ann Duncan and Greg Godbout. All right. I hope you all had a fabulous day. Thank you for joining us. Big thanks to the Booz Allen team for making this event possible. Thank you for Hortonworks for sponsoring. Congratulations to Deb Diaz. Thank you for all of our fabulous speakers. Hopefully you met someone new, learned something new, had a great discussion, and can take something back to your agency. Look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.